The most dangerous door in a human life is often not the one guarded by thunder, but the one left quietly open when no one is watching. A single moment of restraint can change the direction of an entire life. Imagine an ordinary person, not a monk in a forest, not a criminal in a dark alley, but someone like us, standing at the edge of 4 silent temptations: the urge to harm, the opportunity to take what has not been given, the sweetness of a forbidden desire, and the easy escape of a lie. This is not the story of a saint who never trembles before temptation. It is the story of a painfully human being who begins to understand why the Buddha taught that refusing these 4 dark doors may be enough to turn the heart toward heaven. There are moments in life that arrive without ceremony. No drum is struck. No warning is written across the sky. The world continues as usual. A kettle boiling, a phone vibrating on a table, a streetlight turning green, a child laughing in another room. And yet within such an ordinary moment, a person may be standing at the edge of a fall. It may happen in the kitchen, when anger rises and the hand reaches for something sharp, not necessarily to kill but to hurt, to punish, to crush a living thing, because the mind has become hot and narrow. It may happen in an office, when a wallet is left behind, when money is counted incorrectly, when a small object can be slipped into a pocket with no witness except the heart itself. It may happen in a message sent late at night, when affection that belongs elsewhere begins to glow with dangerous sweetness, when the forbidden appears more alive than what is faithful and honorable. It may happen in a conversation when the truth becomes inconvenient, and one small lie, it promises to save face, avoid blame, gain advantage, or protect an image we cannot bear to lose. In such moments, people often tell themselves this is nothing, a small harm, a small theft, a small betrayal, a small falsehood, nothing dramatic, nothing that will shake the earth, nothing that will be remembered tomorrow. But the Buddha's teaching asks us to look more deeply. The earth may not shake, but the heart shifts. The world may not accuse us, but something within us has bowed before darkness. The act may be brief, but the mark it leaves may travel far beyond the moment. And sometimes the most terrible descent does not begin with a scream. It begins with permission. Just this once. No one will know. I deserve this. It is not that serious. These are the soft words by which the mind opens the door. There is a kind of moral collapse that does not look like collapse at all. It looks like convenience. It looks like opportunity. It looks like relief. It looks like getting away with something. It is not always a violent scene in the open world. More often, it begins in a private room inside the mind, where a person sits alone with desire, anger, fear, shame, or greed, and decides who they are going to become. This is why the ancient teachings speak so seriously about certain actions. Not because life is meant to be lived in fear, but because the heart is not untouched by what it does. Every action trains us. Every choice leaves a scent in consciousness. When repeated, it becomes a road. When cherished, it becomes a home. When defended, it becomes an identity. The Buddha spoke of 4 actions that carry a heavy karmic weight, 4 ways by which a human being can drag the mind downward. Taking life, taking what is not, sexual misconduct and false speech. These are not merely social rules. They are not arbitrary lines drawn by culture. They are doors, and beyond each door is a landscape of suffering. To take life is to turn against the breath of another being. It is to say, whether through rage, indifference, convenience, or pleasure, your life may end because my desire is stronger than my compassion. It may be a great violence, or it may begin as a casual cruelty. But whenever the mind becomes willing to destroy life, something in it grows hard. The tenderness that recognizes, this being fears pain as I fear pain. This being clings to life as I cling to life, becomes covered. The heart forgets kinship. To take what has not been given is to violate trust. It is to reach beyond the boundary of rightful ownership and place one's own craving above another's welfare. Perhaps the object is small, Perhaps no one will suffer greatly. Perhaps the loss will be unnoticed. But the heart knows the movement. It knows the leaning. It knows the moment it chose gain over integrity. And slowly, if this is repeated, the mind becomes skilled at justifying what it wants. Sexual misconduct is especially powerful because desire can dress itself in beauty. It does not always appear ugly at first. It may come with fragrance, music, tenderness, longing, excitement, the feeling of being alive again. But not every sweetness is nourishment. Some sweetness is poison wrapped in honey. When desire ignores commitment, trust, responsibility, or the dignity of another human being, it becomes a fire that burns more than the two people who stand inside it. Families may be wounded. Trust may be shattered. Children may carry sorrow without understanding its origin. And the one who entered thinking only of pleasure may leave with the taste of ruin. False speech may seem lighter than the others, but it is a doorway with many hidden steps downward. A lie bends reality. It leads another mind away from what is true. It can steal trust, protect wrongdoing, plant confusion, destroy reputations, inflame hatred, or guide someone into harm. Even when the lie is small, repeated lying trains the mouth to serve fear and desire instead of truth. There is an old saying that stealing becomes familiar to the hand, and sleeping late becomes familiar to the eyes. But in truth, anything repeated becomes familiar. Kindness becomes familiar. Cruelty becomes familiar. Generosity becomes familiar. Whatever we practice, we become less ashamed of. Whatever we repeat, we become more able to do. This is the quiet terror of habit. The first time, the heart trembles. The second, it trembles less. The third time, it begins to explain. Later, it may even laugh. And one day, what once felt like a fall begins to feel like ordinary ground. But the reverse is also true. If repeated wrongdoing forms the road downward, repeated restraint forms a road upward. If the act of killing, stealing, misconduct and lying can burden the mind and pull it towards suffering, then the refusal of these acts is not a small thing. It is a profound purification. It is not merely the absence of evil. It is the presence of strength. There is a hidden nobility in the moment when a person can do wrong and does not. When there is a chance to harm, and the hand stops. When there is a chance to steal, and the pocket remains empty. When forbidden desire calls with a voice both sweet and urgent, and the feet turn away. When a lie would solve everything for the moment, and the mouth chooses truth. These moments may never be applauded. No crowd may see them. No one may write them down. But in the unseen chamber of the heart, something bright is born. The person becomes trustworthy to themselves, and that trust is not a small treasure. We often imagine spiritual life as something distant: temples, scriptures, long meditations, pilgrimages, offerings, incense rising into a quiet sky. These things have their beauty, but the foundation of the path may be much closer, much more immediate, and much more difficult. It may be found in the 3 seconds before anger becomes violence, in the breath before the hand takes what is not given, in the pause before the message is answered, in the silence before the lie is spoken. That pause is a sacred place. In that pause, a human being is not yet lost. The old habit is present, but it has not yet taken command. Desire is burning, but it has not yet become action. Fear is whispering, but it has not yet become speech. The future is still open. Heaven and hell are not merely distant locations waiting after death. They are directions of the heart. In that moment, the heart can turn. The Buddha did not teach morality as a cage. He taught it as protection. To refrain from killing is to protect life, but it is also to protect one's own compassion from becoming ruined. To refrain from stealing is to protect others' possessions, but also to protect one's own integrity from decay. To refrain from sexual misconduct is to protect families, trust, and the dignity of love, but also to protect oneself from the storm of remorse and tangled craving. To refrain from lying is to protect truth in the world, but also to protect the clarity of one's own mind. A person who refuses these four does not merely avoid punishment. They begin to live in a different atmosphere. Their sleep becomes cleaner. Their eyes become steadier. Their words carry more weight. Their relationships, even if imperfect, are not built on hidden knives. They may still suffer. They may still grieve, struggle, fail in many lesser ways. But there is a foundation beneath them, a ground that does not easily break. Think of an ordinary person at the end of a long day. They have been insulted, tempted, ignored, pressured, misunderstood. Their patience has worn thin. They are not glowing with holiness. They are tired. Their mind is full of complaints. Then the opportunity appears. A living creature is in their way, and anger wants to crush it. A valuable thing is unattended, and greed says, "Take it." A forbidden relationship opens like a secret garden, and desire says, "Enter." A difficult truth stands before them, and fear says, "Hide." No scripture floats down from the sky. No divine voice commands them. There is only breath, heat, trembling, and choice. If they kill, something descends. If they steal, something descends. If they betray, something descends. If they lie, something descends. But if they stop, even painfully, even reluctantly, even with desire still burning in the chest, something rises. This is important to understand. Restraint does not always feel pure at first. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like humiliation. Sometimes the person who walks away from wrongdoing does not feel victorious. They feel deprived, foolish, exposed, even angry. They may think, "Why should I be the one to hold back? Others do worse and live comfortably. Others lie and succeed. Others take and grow rich. Others betray and are admired." The mind can become bitter when virtue seems unrewarded, but karma is not measured by applause. The deepest consequences of an action are not always visible immediately. Poison may taste sweet at first. Medicine may taste bitter at first. What matters is what the act plants in the heart, what direction it gives the mind, what kind of person it quietly builds. The one who refuses to kill strengthens compassion. The one who refuses to steal strengthens honesty. The one who refuses forbidden passion strengthens dignity. The one who refuses to lie strengthens truth. And these strengths do not vanish, they gather. They become character. They become lightness. They become a path. This is the central question we must carry through this narration. If committing these four actions can drag the mind towards suffering, then can refusing them become a path of purification, dignity, and heavenly rebirth? Can the simple refusal to enter these dark doors become more powerful than we have believed? Can a human being, flawed and ordinary, create a heavenly direction not by performing miracles, but by not betraying the deepest law of the heart? The teaching says yes, not because restraint is easy, but because it is transformative. Not because the person who refrains is already pure, but because refraining is how purity begins. Not because heaven is bought by fear, but because a mind that protects life, respects what belongs to others, honors the sacred boundaries of love, and speaks truth is already becoming luminous. Before any great awakening, there is a smaller awakening, the moment we see the door clearly and refuse to enter. Before any liberation, there is a first dignity, the courage to stop. And before we can understand the path upward, we must first look honestly at the first doorway downward, the taking of life. To take a life is not only to stop a breath, it is to stand before another being's fragile wish to continue, and to decide that our anger, our hunger, our convenience, our fear, or our profit matters more. It is a decision made in the mind before it is carried out by the hand. Long before the weapon is lifted, long before the trap is set, long before the order is given, something inside has already turned away. The heart has already whispered, "This life is not as important as mine. This pain is not as real as mine. This fear does not matter." That is why, in the Buddhist way of looking deeply, killing is never merely an outward action. It is a rupture in compassion. It is a hardening of the heart at the exact place where tenderness should have appeared. Whether the being is large or small, whether it has a voice we can hear or only a trembling we can sense, it is still moving under the same ancient law. It wants to live. A bird flees from danger. A fish struggles on the hook. An insect runs from the shadow of a foot. A human being pleads, hides, resists, trembles. The forms are different, but the message is the same. Life clings to life, and when we see that clearly, something in us becomes quiet. We may still be afraid. We may still feel the old habits rising. Strike, crush, destroy, get rid of it, make it disappear. But in that small pause, another kind of intelligence awakens. Not the intelligence that calculates advantage. Not the intelligence that wins arguments. Not the intelligence that knows how to dominate. It is the intelligence of compassion, the wisdom that recognizes, this being does not want suffering, just as I do not want suffering. This being does not want death, just as I do not want death. The first precept, the refusal to kill, begins there. It begins with recognition. It begins when the mind stops treating other life as an object. So much violence in the world begins with a single inner distortion. We stop seeing someone or something as alive in the same way we are alive. We call them pests. We call them enemies. We call them useless. We call them in the way. We call them less than us. And the moment we give a being a name that pushes it outside the circle of concern, harming it becomes easier. The mind prepares the ground. The hand simply follows. This is true in the smallest moments and in the largest tragedies. A man who strikes an animal in anger has already decided that his irritation is more worthy than that creature's pain. A person who kills for sport has already decided that another being's terror can become entertainment. A society that destroys human lives in hatred has already decided that certain faces no longer carry the full weight of humanity. The outer act may differ in scale, but the root has a similar taste. The failure to feel the sacredness of another's existence. In Buddhist moral reflection, the seriousness of killing is connected to intention. It is not merely that a body dies. Bodies die every day. Leaves fall. Insects perish under footsteps we never knew we took. Life is delicate and constantly passing. But when the mind knows, chooses, intends, and moves toward the destruction of life, then karma is formed with weight. The will becomes involved. The heart participates. And because the heart participates, the heart is changed. This is why even a small act can leave a long shadow. It is not only what happens to the being that dies. It is what happens to the one who kills. Something in the killer becomes less sensitive. Something must be covered over in order to continue. If a person kills again and again, the mind learns how not to feel. It practices ignoring the cry, the struggle, the pleading, the silent will to survive. And whatever we practice, we become skilled at. We can become skilled at compassion, but we can also become skilled at cruelty. We can become skilled at restraint, but we can also become skilled at indifference. There was once a man who lived at the edge of a small village, near a field where he grew vegetables with his own hands. He was not a bad man. In fact, most people would have called him decent. He worked hard, cared for his family, paid what he owed, and did not seek trouble. But life had made him tired. Many seasons of debt and disappointment had narrowed his patience. He had begun to measure things only by whether they helped him or harmed him. One morning before dawn, he found that much of his young crop had been eaten. The leaves were torn. The soil was disturbed. At first he stood silently, staring at the damage. Then anger rose in him like fire catching dry grass. He had spent weeks tending those plants. He had counted on selling them. He had imagined the small relief that money would bring. And now, in a single night, some animal had destroyed his work. He searched the edge of the field and found the signs. A burrow near the stones, small tracks, bits of chewed stem. A family of rabbits had come in the dark. That day he went into the village and bought a trap. He told himself it was reasonable. He told himself he had no choice. He told himself compassion was a luxury for people who could afford losses. By evening, he had set the trap near the burrow, baited it, and returned to his house with a grim satisfaction. In his mind, the matter was already settled. Something had taken from him. Something would pay. But in the middle of the night, rain began to fall. It was not a storm, only a cold rain, steady and thin. The man woke and could not sleep again. He heard the rain on the roof. He thought of the field, he thought of the trap, and then, unwillingly, he imagined the animal caught in it, unable to move, soaked in the dark, waiting for morning. At first he pushed the thought away. "It deserves it," he muttered. "It ruined my crop." But the mind, once it has seen something, cannot always return to blindness. Again he saw it, a small body trembling, not understanding debt, not understanding ownership, not understanding his anger. Only hunger, only fear, only the instinct to live one more night. He lay there for a long time. Then another memory came to him. When he was a boy, he had once been lost in the forest at dusk. He remembered the panic in his chest, the way every shadow seemed alive, the way he had called for his father until his throat hurt. He remembered how small he felt beneath the trees. He remembered the relief when someone found him, when a hand reached out and did not strike him, did not blame him, did not say, "You deserve your fear." It simply brought him home. The man sat up. He did not suddenly become a saint. His anger did not vanish. The crop was still damaged. His worries were still real. But something had entered the space between anger and action. He took a lamp, went out and walked toward the field. The trap had sprung. Inside was a rabbit, pressed against the metal, its body rigid with terror. The man knelt down. The little animal's eyes were wide and black, shining in the lamplight. Its breath came fast. It did not know the man's story. It did not know his debts. It did not know the long months of labor behind those leaves. It only knew that it was caught, and that death might be near. The man's hand moved toward the trap. In that moment he had power. This is important. He had the power to kill. He had the justification ready. He had the habit of human superiority behind him. No one from the village was watching. No one would praise him if he showed mercy. No one would condemn him if he ended the animal's life. He stood in that quiet place where karma is born, alone with intention. And there, in the rain, he paused. He saw that the rabbit wanted to live, not in a philosophical way, not as an idea. He saw it directly, in the trembling of its body, in the desperate stillness of its fear. And because he saw it, he could not completely return to the man he had been the evening before. He opened the trap. For a few seconds the rabbit did not move, then it bolted into the wet grass and disappeared. The man remained kneeling. The rain soaked his shoulders. His anger had not been rewarded. His crop had not been restored. His problems had not been solved. Yet something in him felt lighter, as if a door had almost opened beneath his feet, and he had stepped back just in time. This is what many people misunderstand about restraint. They think it is weakness. They think to refrain means to be powerless, timid, defeated. But true restraint exists only where there is power. If we cannot harm, our harmlessness may be only circumstance. But when we can harm, when we have the chance, the strength, the excuse, the emotion, and still we do not harm, then restraint becomes a noble force. It is not the absence of energy. It is energy governed by wisdom. It is fire held in a lamp instead of released as a wildfire. The person who refuses to kill is not saying that life is always simple. They are not denying that there are conflicts, dangers, losses, and fears. They are not pretending that the world is gentle. They are making a deeper commitment. Even in a world where harm is possible, I will not let my heart become careless with life. This commitment may begin with human beings, but it does not end there. Buddhism invites us to widen the circle, to notice the ant struggling in water, to notice the moth trapped against a window, to notice the animal on the road, the fish in the market, the frightened dog, the old tree filled with nesting birds. This does not mean we can avoid all harm in an imperfect world. No one walks without consequence. No one lives without touching other lives. But we can reduce deliberate harm. We can become more awake. We can stop taking pleasure in destruction. We can stop using convenience as an excuse for cruelty. And perhaps most importantly, we can watch the mind before the act. Because killing begins internally. It begins when irritation says, "I don't care." It begins when fear says, "Destroy it before it troubles me." It begins when greed says, "Its life is worth less than my gain." It begins when pride says, "I have the right." If we wait until the hand has moved, we may be too late. The real practice is to meet violence while it is still a thought, still a tightening in the chest, still a story we are telling ourselves about why another being does not matter. There, at the root, we can soften. There, we can question the impulse. There, we can remember that every being lives at the center of its own experience, feeling pleasure and pain from within, fearing harm from within, clinging to existence from within. When this remembrance becomes strong, compassion is no longer sentimental. It becomes discipline. It becomes courage. It becomes a way of walking through the world without leaving unnecessary terror behind us. There are victories no one sees. A harsh word swallowed before it becomes a wound, a fist unclenched, a weapon put down, a trap opened, a life spared. The world may not applaud these moments, no history book may record them, but in the hidden chamber of the heart they matter. They shape the direction of a life. They determine whether the mind grows darker or brighter. To refuse killing is to protect more than the one who might have died. It is to protect the killer from becoming a killer. It is to protect the mind from that heavy descent into hardness. It is to say, again and again, may my strength not become violence. May my fear not become cruelty. May my hunger not become bloodshed. May my suffering not make me blind to the suffering of others. And when a person lives this way, even imperfectly, something changes in their presence. Animals may still fear them, but less. People may sense a gentleness not based on weakness, but on reverence. Their own heart becomes a safer place to live. Their sleep becomes less haunted. Their eyes become less sharp with aggression. Slowly, the world is no longer divided so easily into what serves me and what obstructs me. It becomes filled with lives, each carrying its own burden, each moving through danger, each asking silently for a little more time. This is the sacred weight of life, not sacred because it never ends. It does end, not sacred because it is always beautiful. Sometimes life is painful, confused, frightened, struggling. But it is sacred because each being experiences its life as precious from within. Even the smallest creature does not regard its own life as small. It clings to it completely. It protects it with all the strength it has. And if we have ever trembled before danger, if we have ever prayed to survive, if we have ever hoped for one more morning, then we already understand. The first doorway downward is opened when we deny this understanding. The first step upward begins when we honor it. So when the chance to kill appears, and we do not kill, something profound has happened. The outer world may look unchanged. The insect may simply crawl away. The animal may vanish into the grass. The enemy may never know how close hatred came. But within us, a battle has been won. The impulse to destroy met the wisdom to protect, and wisdom remained standing. Once we see the sacred weight of life, we can begin to understand why refusing to kill becomes an unseen victory. There are moments in life when no one is watching, and yet the whole direction of a person's heart is being decided. A mosquito lands on the arm. A cockroach runs across the floor. A small ant appears near the cup, wandering without any knowledge of the human world towering above it. The hand rises almost by habit. It would be quick, easy, unquestioned. No court would condemn it. No one would call it a crime. And yet, in that tiny pause before the hand comes down, a teaching of the Buddha becomes very real. If we have the chance to kill, and we do not kill, we have already stepped away from a dark road. This is not a small thing. Many people imagine spiritual achievement as something distant, reserved for monks in forests, saints in ancient stories, or people who have given up everything. But sometimes the path begins in a kitchen, in a bedroom, beside a garden wall, in traffic, in an argument, in the moment when anger says, destroy, and awareness quietly says, stop. The victory may be invisible, but it is not empty. The world may not applaud, but the mind knows, the heart knows. Something within us has chosen not to become cruel. To refuse killing is not only to spare another life, it is also to save our own mind from becoming hard. Because whenever we kill with intention, something in the mind has to close first. We have to stop feeling. We have to reduce the living being before us into a nuisance, an object, an obstacle, a thing in the way. Whether it is a tiny insect or a person we hate, the movement of the mind is similar. First we make the other one less real, then we give ourselves permission. Then the act follows. But when the hand stops itself, the process is interrupted. The mind is not allowed to complete its descent. The being before us is no longer merely a disturbance. It becomes life, fragile life, confused life, afraid life, life that did not ask to be born into our path, just as we did not ask to be born into the path of sickness, danger, aging, and death. And in that recognition, empathy begins to breathe. A person may say, it is only an insect. But if we look deeply, the issue is not only the insect. The issue is what kind of person we become when we are powerful over the weak. Anyone can appear kind when there is no temptation to harm. Anyone can speak of compassion when nothing irritates them, threatens them, or disgusts them. But when something small and helpless is in our reach, and we can crush it without consequence, the truth of our training appears. That is why the refusal to kill is powerful. It reveals that the heart has learned restraint. There is a gentleness that does not come from weakness. It comes from strength that has been purified. It is easy to dominate when we have the advantage. It is easy to strike when the other cannot strike back. It is easy to use force when anger supplies the courage. But to hold back, to breathe, to see clearly, to protect life when destruction would be simpler, that is a different kind of strength. That is strength with wisdom inside it. Imagine someone in a moment of rage. A harsh word has been spoken. Pride is wounded. The body wants to move, the fist wants to tighten, the voice wants to become a weapon. In that instant, the person stands at a door. One step forward, and harm may be done that cannot be recalled. A slap, a shove, a blow, a threat, an act of violence that will echo through years. But then, somewhere inside, the person remembers. This life before me is not mine to injure. This body is not mine to punish. This anger is not a lord I must obey. So the hand lowers. Maybe the face still burns. Maybe the breath is still heavy. Maybe the heart is still storming. But the act has not been committed. The line has not been crossed. And because the line has not been crossed, a future has been protected. The other person has been protected from pain. The one who felt anger has been protected from remorse. A family may have been protected from fear. A relationship may have been protected from a wound too deep to heal. This too is non-killing. We should not think that killing begins only when life ends. The road toward killing begins earlier, in cruelty, in delighting in pain, in encouraging violence, in making fun of suffering, in training the mind to enjoy the downfall of another. When we refuse to cheer cruelty, we are also stepping away from that first doorway. When we do not share the video of someone being beaten for entertainment, when we do not laugh at an animal being tormented, when we do not urge someone to teach them a lesson through harm, we are guarding the mind. Sometimes we do not hold the knife, but we sharpen the intention. Sometimes we do not strike, but we approve the striking. Sometimes we do not kill, but we create the atmosphere in which killing becomes easier. The Buddha's teaching asks us to become careful not only with our hands, but with our hearts. To abstain from killing is not merely to avoid the final act. It is to withdraw our support from the whole spirit of violence. It is to stop feeding the inner beast that says life is cheap when it is inconvenient, ugly, weak, or opposed to us. In daily life, this practice may look humble. A person finds a spider in the house and takes a cup and a piece of paper, carrying it outside instead of crushing it. Someone sees a worm drying on the pavement after rain and moves it back to the soil. A driver slows down for a stray dog instead of speeding past in annoyance. A child is taught not to throw stones at birds, not because the birds are useful to us, but because they want to live. These actions may seem small to a world obsessed with great achievements, but to the mind that performs them sincerely, they are acts of purification. Each time we spare life, we remind ourselves that the world does not exist only for our convenience. This reminder is medicine. Human beings suffer deeply from the illusion that whatever bothers us may be removed by force. If someone annoys us, silence them. If something blocks us, break it. If a creature frightens us, kill it. If a person humiliates us, destroy their peace. This habit, if repeated, makes the mind dangerous. It gives anger a road. It gives pride a weapon. It gives fear permission to become violence. But when we practice non-killing, that road is slowly closed. At first, the pause may be difficult. The old habit may still rise. The hand may still move quickly. The mouth may still speak sharply. The mind may still justify itself. But if we keep returning to awareness, the pause grows stronger. The hand stops sooner. The anger cools faster. The heart remembers more easily. And one day, what used to feel like restraint begins to feel natural. Compassion becomes quicker than cruelty. This is how a heavenly quality is born in an ordinary human being. Heaven, in the deepest moral sense, is not merely a place above the clouds. It is a condition of mind shaped by brightness. A mind that does not delight in harm becomes lighter. A person who does not carry the memory of violence sleeps differently. There is less shadow in the chest, less need to hide from oneself, less fear that one's own actions will return as pain. Remorse is a heavy companion. Those who have taken life often discover that the act does not end when the body falls. It continues in memory. It returns in dreams, in silence, in old age, in moments when the mind has no distraction. Even when the world excuses the act, the heart may still know. And if the act was done in anger, cruelty, greed, or carelessness, the wound in the doer can remain long after. The wound in the victim is no longer visible, but the one who has stopped the hand is spared that burden. They may remember the moment, but they remember it with gratitude. I could have harmed, but I did not. I could have crushed, but I protected. I could have obeyed anger, but I waited. That memory becomes a quiet refuge. It becomes evidence that goodness is possible in them. It becomes confidence on the path. This confidence is not arrogance. It is not the pride of saying, I am holy. It is the peaceful knowledge that at least in that moment, the heart did not betray wisdom, and such moments gathered one by one become character. A gentle person is not created in one grand gesture. A fearless person is not born in one dramatic vow. Mercy is built by repeated refusals. Refusing to kill the small creature. Refusing to hurt the person who cannot defend themselves. Refusing to speak words that could push someone toward despair. Refusing to celebrate revenge. Refusing to let anger sit on the throne of the heart. And as this refusal deepens, fearlessness also grows. Why fearlessness? Because a person who does not intend harm becomes less frightening to the world, and the world becomes less frightening to them. Animals may still run, people may still misunderstand, danger may still exist, but inwardly there is a different atmosphere. The mind that wishes no killing carries less hostility. It does not constantly prepare for battle. It does not see every living being as an enemy. It does not need to dominate in order to feel safe. There is a beautiful freedom in that. When we stop treating life as something we may take whenever we are disturbed, we begin to feel related to all beings. not equal in shape, not equal in intelligence, not equal in strength, but equal in the wish to avoid suffering. The bird wants safety, the dog wants safety, the insect fleeing from our shadow wants safety. The person who insulted us beneath all their confusion also wants safety. Even those who act wrongly are still driven by the same ancient hunger, to protect themselves, to find happiness, to escape pain. Seeing this does not mean we allow harm. It does not mean we never defend ourselves or others. It does not mean wisdom becomes passive. There are times when we must prevent violence, restrain danger, set boundaries and act firmly. But even then, the heart can be trained not to hate life. We can stop harm without worshipping harm. We can protect without enjoying cruelty. We can be firm without becoming savage. This distinction matters deeply. Non-killing is not sentimental weakness. It is a disciplined reverence for life. It asks us to be awake precisely when instinct becomes blind. It asks us to notice the moment before action, the moment when karma is still soft, still forming, still able to be redirected. Once the act is done, we inherit its result, but before the act, there is a sacred space. In that space, we are not slaves, we can choose. And perhaps that is why the merit is so great. Not because the universe is impressed by appearances, but because the mind has turned toward liberation. It has refused the old command of greed, hatred, and delusion. It has said, I do not have to follow every impulse. I do not have to injure just because I can. I do not have to make another being pay for my discomfort. This is an awakening in miniature. The person who spares a life may not feel anything dramatic. There may be no vision, no sound, no sudden light. But the law of the heart is subtle. Every intention leaves a trace. Every restraint strengthens a path. Every act of mercy prepares the mind for greater mercy. If today we can spare the insect, tomorrow we may spare the harsh word. If today we can lower the hand, tomorrow we may lower the weapon of pride. If today we can see fear in a small creature, tomorrow we may see suffering in a difficult person. Compassion expands by practice. And so, the first precept is not merely a command not to kill. It is an invitation to become a shelter in whose presence life feels less threatened, a shelter where the weak are not automatically crushed, a shelter where anger may arise but does not rule, a shelter where power bows to conscience. Think of what kind of world begins there, a home where children learn that small beings are not toys for cruelty, a workplace where people do not destroy one another out of ambition, a community where disputes do not immediately become violence, a society where strength is measured not only by victory, but by the ability to protect what is vulnerable. Such a world does not appear all at once. It begins with a single mind that refuses the downward pull. It begins when the hand stops itself. And in that stopping, we learn something humbling. We learn that life is not ours to command completely. We are temporary guests among temporary guests. We walk on a ground filled with beings trying to survive. We breathe air shared with creatures we rarely notice. We live by receiving more than we understand. Our own body is fragile. Our own breath is uncertain. Our own life can be interrupted by conditions beyond our control. When we know this, mercy becomes natural. How can we casually take what we ourselves are desperate to keep? How can we dismiss the fear of another being when fear has visited us so many times? How can we call another life insignificant when, to that being, its life is the whole world? This reflection softens the heart, not with sadness alone, but with responsibility. We begin to move more carefully. We begin to speak more carefully. We begin to understand that every day offers chances to fall and chances to rise. The doorway downward may appear in anger, convenience, impatience, amusement, fear. But the doorway upward appears in the same place, the same moment, the same raised hand. One person crushes, another pauses. One person says, it does not matter. Another says, it matters to this being. And between those two responses lies the difference between a mind growing darker and a mind becoming bright. So when the Buddha says that killing is a path to suffering, and that refraining from killing is a path to heavenly birth, we should not hear only doctrine, we should hear an intimate truth about the human heart. Violence makes the mind coarse. Mercy makes it luminous. Killing plants fear. Non-killing plants peace. Cruelty follows us like a shadow. Compassion follows us like a blessing. No one can avoid every harm in this complicated life. We walk, and unseen beings may be injured. We live, and existence itself is tangled with loss. But intention is the field we are asked to cultivate. Care is the lamp we are asked to carry. We may not be able to make our lives perfectly harmless, but we can make our hearts less willing to harm. We can reduce the violence that comes through choice. We can refuse the killing that anger, greed, and carelessness recommend, and each refusal matters. It matters when no one praises it. It matters when the spared creature cannot thank us. It matters when the person we did not strike never understands what we overcame. It matters when we walk away from cruelty, and others call us weak. It matters because the mind is being shaped and the future is being prepared. At the end of a day, a person may not remember every small mercy, but the heart has recorded them. A little less hatred, a little more patience, a little less hardness, a little more tenderness. These are not decorations of the spiritual life. They are the path itself. The first door to hell opens when we become willing to destroy life. The first door to heaven opens when we refuse. And so, again and again, in ordinary rooms, on ordinary roads, among ordinary irritations, the practice returns to us. The chance appears. The impulse rises. The hand begins to move. Compassion enters. The memory of shared fragility enters, and the hand stops itself. In that quiet stopping, a being may live, and in that quiet stopping, something noble in us lives too. There is another story that shows this same doorway from a different angle, the angle of a grief so large it can make revenge feel like justice. It is told a little differently in every village, but it always begins the same way, with a man whose younger brother was killed in a dispute over a stretch of land no wider than a footpath. The killing had not been planned. It had happened in the heat of an argument that turned suddenly physical. A single blow struck without the striker fully understanding, until it was already done, what his hands had done. The man who struck it was arrested within the day. The law would deal with him in its own slow way, and everyone in the village understood that the law's way and the family's grief were two entirely different rivers that did not always meet at the same point. For many months, the brother who remained carried his grief the way a person carries a stone in the chest, not always visible, but never fully set down. He would wake sometimes in the grey hour before dawn, certain, for a confused moment, that his brother was still alive, still sleeping in the next room before memory arrived, and the stone settled back into place. He grew thinner, he spoke less. Neighbors who had known him as a man quick to laugh began to speak of him carefully, the way one speaks near a wound that has not closed. One evening, nearly a year after the killing, the man who had struck the fatal blow was released, the sentence served, the debt to the law considered paid. He returned to the same village because he had nowhere else to go and no money to go there with. This is a detail that matters in the story. He did not vanish into some distant city where his face was unknown. He came back to the same narrow streets, the same market, the same well where water was drawn every morning. The brother learned of the return within hours. By evening, he was standing outside the small house where the man now lived with an elderly aunt, a long knife tucked into his belt beneath his shirt, the kind of knife used for cutting cane, not for anything else, though it could certainly be used for anything else if a hand decided it should be. He did not go inside immediately. He stood in the dark outside the house for a long while, and in that darkness, something old and patient in him began to speak, the way it had been speaking quietly for the better part of a year. waiting for exactly this opportunity. It told him that justice had not truly been served, that a year in a cell was not equal to a brother's whole remaining life, that the world would understand, that some in the village might even privately admire him for finishing what the law had left unfinished. It told him, as such voices always tell us, that this was not really an act of harm at all, but an act of balance, a debt finally settled, a scale finally made even. He stood there long enough that his legs began to ache. He thought of his brother's face, not the face at the funeral, but an earlier one, laughing over some foolish joke the week before the argument that ended everything. He thought of his own mother, who had already buried one son and who was asleep, he assumed, in her small house on the other side of the village, unaware that her surviving son was standing in the dark with a cane knife under his shirt. He thought, too, of the man inside the house, and found that he could not quite picture him as a monster, though he wanted very much to. He could only picture a frightened, ordinary man who had done one terrible thing in a moment he could not take back, a man who was now old before his time, thin from a year of confinement, sitting inside with an aunt who had nothing to do with any of it, and who would be the one to find whatever happened that night. There is no single moment in this story where a light appeared in the sky, or a voice spoke from beyond the world to stop him. What happened instead was smaller, and in its own way, harder to explain. He simply became tired of the stone in his chest, tired of imagining his brother's face every night before sleep, tired of carrying a knife whose only purpose, if used, would be to give the village a second funeral within a single year, and to give his own children, not yet born, a father who had spent the rest of his life inside the same cell the other man had just left. He took the knife from his belt and let it fall into the tall grass beside the house, and he walked home without going inside. He did not forgive that night. Forgiveness, when it eventually came slowly, over years, in small increments so gradual that he could not have named the day it arrived. What happened that particular night was smaller than forgiveness, and, some would say, harder. He simply refused to add a second death to the one that already existed. He walked away from a door that stood wide open in front of him, a door that the entire village, had he walked through it, would likely have understood and perhaps even quietly excused. Understood, but not innocent. That is the nature of this particular door. It rarely presents itself as senseless cruelty. It presents itself as justice delayed, as a debt that must be collected, as the only response a wounded person's dignity will allow. It is, of all the doors, perhaps the one most easily disguised as virtue, because grief is real, and the desire for balance is not in itself a corrupt desire, but a knife carried in the dark toward a sleeping house does not restore what was lost. It only widens the wound to include a second family, a second set of children who will grow up, in their turn carrying their own stone. Years later, the man who had walked away from that door was asked, by someone who had heard fragments of the story, why he had not gone through with it that night, when no one would have blamed him, and some might even have called it justice. He thought about the question for a long time before answering, the way people do when they are trying to be honest, rather than simply quotable. He said that he had understood, standing in that darkness, that his brother's death had already taken one good thing from the world, and that walking through that door would only have taken a second one. Himself, the version of himself capable of loving a brother enough to grieve like that in the first place. He said that carrying grief, however heavy, had at least left him whole enough to still recognize his mother's face, to still hold his own children years later without flinching at what his hands had done. The other path, he said, would not have returned his brother to him. It would only have made sure that two families instead of one spent the rest of their lives visiting a grave. This is the weight carried by the first door, the door of harming life, when it appears not as an animal in a trap or a stranger in an alley, but as a grief-stricken heart standing outside a familiar house with a reasonable-sounding voice inside, insisting that this time, surely, the harm would be justified. The teaching does not ask us to feel nothing when we are wounded. It does not ask grief to disappear or anger to be pretended away. It asks something smaller and, in the end, more merciful, that even in the presence of a door which the whole world might forgive us for entering, we remember what waits on the other side, and we let the knife fall into the grass instead. Yet life is not the only thing people violate. The next doorway opens when desire reaches for what was never freely given. There is a kind of taking that does not look violent from the outside. No blood is spilled, no door is broken, no one screams in the street. A hand simply reaches, a number is quietly changed, a truth is left unspoken, a benefit is accepted, though the heart knows it was not meant for us. And because the world does not shake, because the sky does not darken, we may tell ourselves it is a small thing. But the Buddha looked deeply into the small things. He did not speak only of thieves hiding in the night, or robbers with weapons, or people who break locks and empty houses. He spoke of taking what has not been given. That phrase is simple, but it is wide enough to cover an entire life. To take what has not been freely given is not only to steal money from a drawer, it is to take advantage of trust. It is to keep what should be returned. It is to benefit from confusion, silence, weakness, or someone else's absence. It is to claim as ours what was never truly offered to us. Sometimes the thing not given is an object, a phone left on a table, a wallet dropped beside a bus seat, a tool borrowed and never returned, a small amount of money that appears by mistake in the bank account, a product scanned wrongly at the store, cheaper than it should have been. While the cashier does not notice, the hand hesitates, the mind begins its work. Maybe it is not worth saying anything. Maybe the company is rich. Maybe the person who lost it should have been more careful. Maybe this is luck. And sometimes the thing not given has no physical shape. We can steal time by making others wait without care, by treating their hours as less valuable than ours. We can steal credit by allowing praise to fall on us for work another person carried. We can steal opportunity by blocking someone out of envy, by hiding information, by using our influence to close a door that should have been open. We can steal attention through deception, affection through manipulation, trust through pretending to be what we are not. We can steal public resources by using what belongs to many, as if it belongs only to us. We can steal peace from a home by constantly taking more patience than we give, more understanding than we return. Theft, in its deeper meaning, is not only about property. It is about fairness. It is about the invisible agreement that allows human beings to live together without fear. When we take what is not ours, we tell the world, quietly or loudly, that our desire is more important than another person's safety. We place our hunger above their right to rest. We place our convenience above their dignity. We say, if I can get away with it, then it is mine. But not everything we can reach belongs to us. There was a man who worked for a small delivery company on the edge of the city. He was not a terrible man. He was not someone people would point to and call corrupt. He loved his children. He worried about his parents. He paid bills late sometimes, but he paid them. He had known tiredness for many years, the kind that sits in the shoulders and makes a person sigh before opening the front door. One rainy evening, after a long day of driving through traffic, he returned to the warehouse to unload the last packages. The floor smelled of wet cardboard and dust. Everyone was in a hurry to go home. A supervisor shouted from the office. Someone laughed near the loading bay. Someone else complained about overtime. In the middle of all this ordinary noise, the man noticed a small parcel that had split open at the corner. Inside was an electronic device, expensive enough to be desired, small enough to disappear. He looked around. No one was watching. The label had been smeared by rainwater. The tracking code was damaged. It might take days for anyone to understand what happened. Perhaps no one ever would. The company would mark it as lost or damaged. Insurance would cover it. The customer would complain, then receive another one. Life would go on. His hand moved almost by itself, not fully, just enough to touch the edge of the box. And there it was, that private moment where a person meets himself without witnesses. The mind began to whisper, "You work hard, you are underpaid. Other people take more. This is nothing. You did not break anything, it came to you. Maybe this is your chance. Your daughter needs a new tablet for school. Your son's shoes are worn out. Your wife has been tired. When does life ever give you something? Take it. Just this once." The strange thing is that temptation often speaks in the language of justice. It does not always say, "Do evil." It says, "You deserve this." It says, "The world has been unfair to you, so take a little back." It says, "No one will suffer." It says, "No one will know." But conscience has a quieter voice. It does not argue like a lawyer. It does not shout like desire. It simply stands there, small and clear, asking, "Is it yours?" The man stood in the warehouse with rainwater dripping from his jacket. He imagined slipping the device into his bag. He imagined walking past the others with a normal face. He imagined the bus ride home, the secret wait beside his lunch container. He imagined opening it at night when everyone slept. He imagined telling himself it was not theft because no person had stood in front of him saying, "No." Then he imagined something else. He imagined the customer waiting, perhaps someone who had saved for months. He imagined the young clerk, who might be blamed for mishandling the package. He imagined the supervisor angry, searching through records. He imagined suspicion spreading among the workers. He imagined eyes narrowing, trust thinning, becoming a little more guarded, because one person had decided to take what was not given. And then he imagined his own home. He saw himself giving the device to his daughter, and he saw her happiness. But behind that happiness he saw his own face, slightly turned away. He saw the lesson hidden in the gift. He could tell her to be honest, to study well, to become a good person. But somewhere in the room, unseen by her, would be the truth. Her father had brought home something that belonged to another. He wondered whether children inherit not only our words, but the atmosphere of our compromises. His hand withdrew. He picked up the damaged package and brought it to The supervisor was busy, irritated, barely grateful. He looked at the box, filled out a form, and said, "Leave it there." That was all. No music, no blessing from the heavens. No one praised him. No one knew the size of the battle that had just taken place in one tired man's chest. But as he walked home that night, something in him was lighter. He still had bills. His children still needed things. The world had not suddenly become fair, but he had not sold his honesty for a secret object. He had not become smaller in his own eyes. He had refused the thing not given, and that refusal became a kind of wealth no thief can carry away. This is why the teaching is so deep. The harm of stealing does not end with the person who loses something. Of course, the victim suffers. A person loses money, loses security, loses confidence in others. A shop owner raises prices because too much has been taken. A family becomes anxious because their home was entered. An employee is suspected because something disappeared. A community spends its energy protecting itself instead of trusting itself. Theft leaves behind more than an empty space. It leaves behind fear, but the thief also loses something. At first, perhaps, he gains. He gains the object, the money, the advantage, the pleasure of getting away. The world may even reward him. He may appear clever. People may say he knows how to survive. He may grow comfortable in the skill of taking. Yet each act of stealing asks the heart to bend away from truth. Each time he ignores the boundary between what is his and what is not. That boundary becomes weaker inside him. What once felt shameful begins to feel normal. What once required excuses begins to require none. This is the danger of repeated action. A person does not become dishonest only in one dramatic fall. Often, he becomes dishonest through small permissions. A little today, a little tomorrow, just this time, just because they will not notice, just because others do worse, just because life is difficult, and slowly, the hand learns, the eye learns, the mind learns. The conscience is not destroyed all at once. It is covered, layer by layer, until its voice sounds distant. People say a thief becomes used to stealing, but this is true of every habit. The hand becomes used to what it repeats. The tongue becomes used to what it says. The heart becomes used to where it rests. If we practice taking, taking becomes easier. If we practice refusing wrongful gain, refusal becomes easier too. This is why the moment of opportunity matters so much. If someone does not steal because there is a camera above them, that is useful, but it is not yet the full measure of virtue. If someone does not steal because the police are nearby, that is restraint, but still supported by fear. If someone does not steal because the owner is watching, that is basic social caution. The deeper test comes when no one is watching, when the record is unclear, when the advantage is possible, when the mind can build a wall of excuses high enough to hide behind. In that private place, a person discovers the direction of his life. There are many chances like this. A worker can add extra hours to a report he did not work. A student can copy an answer and call it survival. A manager can take credit for an idea that came from a quiet employee. A friend can borrow money and avoid the conversation until the lender feels ashamed to ask. A person can use another's kindness again and again, knowing they are too gentle to refuse. Someone can take office supplies home, misuse public funds, waste shared resources, or treat a common space as if unseen hands will always clean up after them. Each act may seem small when held alone, but morality is rarely built from one grand event. It is woven through daily decisions, through what we do with what is unguarded, through how we behave when power is uneven. A lost wallet is not only a wallet, it is a mirror. An accidental overpayment is not only extra money, it is a question. Another person's trust is not only an opportunity, it is a sacred thing placed in our care. To live without stealing is to live with reverence for boundaries. This is mine, that is yours. This belongs to the community, that belongs to the truth. This praise belongs to the one who earned it. That time belongs to the person who is waiting. This confidence was shared with me, not given for gossip. That weakness in another person is not an invitation to exploit them. Such clarity brings peace. A person who refuses to take what is not given may not become rich in the eyes of the world. He may still struggle. He may watch others advance through cunning and wonder if honesty is foolish. He may feel at times as if he is walking uphill while others ride past him. But inside, he has a ground to stand on. He does not need to remember which lie covers which theft. He does not need to fear the knock at the door, the exposed message, the old mistake returning. His sleep is simpler, his speech is cleaner, his presence becomes trustworthy. And trust is one of the most precious forms of wealth. When people know we will not take what is not ours, they can relax around us, they can leave their bag on the chair, they can speak openly, they can work beside us without guarding every idea, they can enter agreements with us without hidden fear. The home becomes softer, the workplace becomes less poisonous, the community becomes more human. One honest person cannot repair the whole world, but around that person, a small field of safety appears. This is already a heavenly quality. Heaven is not only a place imagined after death, it begins as a condition of the heart. When greed loosens, the heart becomes spacious. When contentment grows, the eyes stop burning with comparison. When we do not need to seize every possible advantage, we can meet life without constant hunger. We can enjoy what is ours without poisoning it with what is stolen. We can receive what is freely given with gratitude. and let pass what was never meant for our hands. Contentment does not mean laziness. It does not mean refusing to work, to build, to improve one's life. It means we do not betray our integrity for gain. We do not confuse opportunity with permission. We do not call something a blessing when it arrives through another person's loss. We learn to say, "If it is not given, I will not take it. If it is not rightful, I will not keep it. If it depends on another being's harm or confusion, I will step back." That stepping back may look like loss, but sometimes what we refuse saves us. We refuse the envelope of cash that would bind us to corruption. We refuse the shortcut that would make us fear exposure. We refuse the secret benefit that would darken our relationship with those who trust us. We refuse to profit from another's mistake. We refuse to build comfort on someone else's disadvantage. And each refusal becomes a door closing behind us, not a door to happiness, but a door to suffering we no longer have to enter. The second door to hell opens when desire convinces the hand to take what has not been given. The second door to heaven opens when the hand, though able to take, remains still. This stillness is not weakness. It is strength hidden in ordinary form. It is the strength of the cashier who corrects an error even when it costs her. The strength of the driver who returns the wallet. The strength of the employee who names the coworker who truly did the work. The strength of the child who admits, "This is not mine." The strength of the person who could benefit quietly but chooses to remain clean. The true test is not whether we can avoid stealing when watched, but whether we can refuse wrongful gain when no one would ever know. Sometimes the most important battles in a human life do not look dramatic from the outside. There is no shouting, no witness, no audience, no applause. Only a hand hovering near what does not belong to it. Only a mind whispering, "No one will know." Only a heart standing at a narrow crossing, where one road leads to a small advantage and the other road leads to self-respect. A person may spend many years thinking that honesty is proven in great matters, in public decisions, in moments when reputation is at stake. But very often, honesty is shaped in the small quiet places, a few extra bills returned by mistake, a tool taken home from work and never brought back, a private file opened without permission, a product copied, a credit stolen, a debt avoided, a promise bent. The world may call these things minor. The heart knows they are not minor. The heart knows when the hand has reached into a place it was never invited to enter. To take what has not been given is not only to move an object from one place to another. It is to disturb the order of trust. It is to tell the world silently, "My hunger is more important than your right. My need is more important than your peace. My convenience is more important than truth." And even if no one sees it, the one who takes it sees it. Deep inside, consciousness records the movement. The door opens. A path is formed. But there is another movement, quieter and more noble. The hand sees what it could take and does not close around it. The mind imagines the benefit and then lets the image pass. The desire rises, bright and convincing, and then slowly bows before conscience. The person walks away, perhaps with nothing added to the pocket, but with something preserved in the soul. That is the clean, empty hand. Empty because it did not seize what was not offered. Clean because it did not carry the stain of hidden wrongdoing. And though the world may not measure such a hand as successful, heaven does. The wise have always known that there is a kind of poverty richer than dishonest wealth. And there is a kind of gain that leaves a person inwardly bankrupt. Imagine someone working in a place where money passes through their hands every day. There is a moment when the accounts are confused, when a mistake favors them, when a small amount could disappear without question. It is not enough to make them rich, but enough to make life easier for a day or two. The thought comes quickly, "This will not hurt anyone. The company has plenty. I am underpaid anyway. Perhaps this is just my chance." The mind is skilled at dressing greed in reasonable clothing. Greed rarely introduces itself as greed. It comes as compensation. It comes as fairness. It comes as necessity. It comes as opportunity. It says, "You deserve this." It says, "Everyone does it." It says, "Only a fool refuses what falls into their hands." But right there, in that inner conversation, dignity is born or lost. The person pauses, they feel the pull. They may even feel the heat of wanting. Then they return the money, correct the account, close the drawer, and continue working. No music plays. No garland is placed around their neck. Perhaps no one even thanks them. But within them, something stands upright. That uprightness is not small. There is a quiet joy in not being owned by greed. It is not loud joy. It is not the excitement of getting something for nothing. It is deeper than that. It is the joy of being able to trust oneself. The joy of walking home without rehearsing lies. The joy of sleeping without fear that a hidden act will come back with a knock at the door. The joy of looking at one's own face and not needing to turn away. Many people think stolen gain is powerful because it gives immediate benefit. It pays a bill. It fills a need. It brings a pleasure. It offers a shortcut. But stolen gain carries a chain inside it. The thing taken begins to take something in return. It takes peace. It takes simplicity. It takes the natural ease of an honest person. It creates the need for concealment. And concealment creates anxiety. Anxiety creates more untruth. One small taking becomes one small lie, then another, then a habit of bending reality around the first wrong act. This is why the ancient teachers were so careful about the hand. The hand is not merely flesh and bone. The hand is a servant of intention. When the mind is greedy, the hand reaches. When the mind is content, the hand rests. Over time, the hand learns. Or it can be trained in restraint. A person who steals once may tremble. The second time, a little less. The third time, less again. What once felt like crossing a dangerous line begins to feel like a path. This is how wrongdoing becomes habit. Not because the soul was born evil, but because repetition dulls the alarm bell. The first lie feels heavy. The 10th lie feels useful. The first theft feels dangerous. The 10th feels normal. The first betrayal feels warning. Later, one may no longer notice the ground has disappeared. But the opposite is also true. And this is a great mercy. Refusal can become habit. Cleanliness can become natural. The first time a person refuses dishonest gain, they may struggle. Desire may argue. Pride may complain. Fear of missing out may burn in the chest. But if they refuse again and again, something begins to change. The mind becomes less impressed by easy gain. The hand becomes less eager to close. The heart begins to taste a more lasting wealth. There is a person who can walk past temptation without feeling poor. That person has become rich in a way no thief can understand. Contentment does not mean having nothing. It means not allowing what we lack to become an excuse to violate what is right. It means we may work, we may save, we may receive, we may enjoy, but we do not cross into what has not been offered. Contentment is a fence around the heart. It does not imprison us. It protects us. It says, "This is mine to receive. That is not mine to take. I can live with less, but I will not live divided against myself." There is tremendous strength in that. In ordinary life, we meet countless forms of what has not been given. Not all stealing looks like breaking a lock or snatching a purse. Sometimes it is taking credit for another person's labor. Sometimes it is using someone's time carelessly, making promises we know we will not honor. Sometimes it is borrowing with no intention of returning. Sometimes it is manipulating affection to receive benefits we have not earned. Sometimes it is taking information, words, ideas, or opportunities without respect for their source. Sometimes it is keeping silent when a mistake gives us more than we are due. The object may change, but the inner movement is the same. The hand of the mind reaches and says, "Let this become mine without rightful giving," and the practice is also the same. We stop, we look. We ask, "Was this given?" Was it offered freely? Does this belong to me by truth or only by concealment? If the answer is not clean, then the hand must open. An open hand may feel empty at first, it may feel foolish. Others may laugh. They may say, "You are too honest, you will never get ahead like this." But what does it mean to get ahead if one must leave one's conscience behind? What is the value of arriving first, at a place where the heart cannot rest? There are people who have much and still feel hunted. There are people who have little and walk as though the sky itself trusts them. Trustworthiness is a kind of wealth. It may not glitter, but it feeds a life. When people know your word is solid, doors open that deceit can never keep open for long. When people know your hands are clean, they relax in your presence. They entrust you with responsibility, with friendship, with sorrow, with truth. An honest person becomes a safe place in an unsafe world. And even if the world does not reward them immediately, their own heart rewards them every day. They do not have to remember which story they told. They do not have to hide their accounts from themselves. They do not fear that prosperity will expose them. They can eat their meal with a simple confidence. This bread is mine. I did not steal it from another mouth. I earned it, received it, or was given it in truth. To deserve one's own bread is a beautiful thing. There is a sweetness in eating what is honestly gained, even if the meal is plain. Rice earned cleanly can taste better than a feast acquired through deceit. A small room paid for, honestly, can feel wider than a mansion built on fraud. A worn shirt bought with rightful money can clothe the body with more dignity than luxury taken from another's loss. The outer world may compare sizes, prices, and status. The inner world compares purity and peace. This does not mean honest people never struggle, they do. Sometimes they struggle deeply. They may watch others gain quickly through crooked ways. They may feel the sting of being overlooked while the cunning are praised. They may wonder whether integrity is costing too much. These are real human moments. The path of clean hands is not always easy. It asks us to trust an invisible accounting when the visible accounting seems unfair. But karma is not only a future idea. It begins immediately in the shaping of the person. Every act leaves an imprint. Every refusal strengthens a muscle. Every honest choice, especially when difficult, builds a home inside the heart where fear has less room to live. The one who refuses wrongful gain does not merely avoid punishment. They become someone different, someone steadier, someone less available to corruption, someone freer. Freedom is often misunderstood. Many think freedom means doing whatever desire suggests. But if desire can pull us anywhere, at any time, for any price, are we free? If a coin can command us, if a secret advantage can bend us, if a hidden opportunity can make us betray our values, then we are not masters of ourselves. We are servants of craving. True freedom is the ability to say no when the soul would be harmed by saying yes. This is why refusing to steal can become a doorway to heaven. Heaven is not only a place after death, it is also a quality of mind. A mind not burning with guilt, a mind not twisted by envy, a mind not calculating how to hide, a mind that can rejoice in another person's belongings without needing to possess them, a mind that can say, "May they enjoy what is theirs, I will cultivate what is mine." Such a mind is spacious. It does not shrink around appetite. It does not turn every encounter into a chance to acquire. It can appreciate beauty without wanting to capture it. It can admire success without wanting to undermine it. It can live near wealth without becoming sick with comparison. This is inner wealth. To be content enough not to steal, and honest enough not to need stolen things. The clean, empty hand is not passive. It is not the hand of someone who has given up on life. It is the hand of a person who chooses rightful effort over wrongful taking. It works, it plants, it builds, it learns. It asks when it needs help. It receives when something is given. It gives when it can, but it does not snatch. It does not secretly carve pieces out of another person's portion. It does not mistake opportunity for permission. There is a world of difference between what is available and what is allowable. A door may be open, but that does not mean we are invited. A password may be known, but that does not mean we have the right to enter. A wallet may be unattended, but that does not mean it has become ours. A colleague's idea may be useful, but that does not mean we may wear it as our own. The moral life begins when we understand that possibility is not permission. And once this understanding matures, the heart becomes gentle. We begin to see that others also fear loss. Others also labor for what they have. Others also hope their efforts will be respected. The boundary around another person's belongings is not merely legal, it is human. To respect it is to say, your life matters, your work matters, your rights matter, even when you are not here to defend them. This respect is a form of compassion. Non-stealing is not only about our purity, it is also about refusing to cause insecurity in others. When theft occurs, even a small theft, it teaches someone to fear. It makes the world feel less safe. It tells a person that their effort can be violated. But when honesty occurs, even quietly, it repairs the world. It adds one more trustworthy action to the field of human life. Perhaps this is why simple acts of honesty move us so deeply. A lost wallet returned. A stranger guarding someone's forgotten bag. A person admitting an overpayment. These stories touch us because they remind us that goodness still breathes. They say that not everyone is waiting to take advantage. They say that conscience still has a voice. They say that the hand can be trained not only to grasp, but to protect. And if we look carefully at our own lives, we will see that the opportunity to practice comes often, not always in grand tests, but in small ones. The extra change, the unpaid fare, the borrowed item, the shared resource, the workplace supply, the unearned praise, the mistake in our favor, the moment when someone trusts us enough not to watch us. That trust is sacred. When no one watches, our character watches. When no one records, the heart records. When no one accuses, conscience still knows whether the hand remained clean. And each time we refuse what is not ours, we make it easier to refuse again. We create a current in the mind. We lay down a path, we become familiar with the taste of restraint. And after a while, restraint no longer feels like loss. It feels like home. There is great dignity in leaving empty-handed when the thing before us is not rightfully ours. We may leave without the money, without the advantage, without the hidden benefit. But we also leave without fear, without stain, without the burden of deceit. We leave lighter than we came. We leave with our name intact in the only place it must first be intact, within our own heart. So when the chance appears, as it surely will, to place something improper into our pocket, into our account, into our reputation, into our life, we can pause, we can breathe. We can remember that not every gain is a blessing. We can remember that some doors open downward. We can remember that a clean, empty hand may be carrying more merit than a full, dishonest one. To refuse wrongful gain is not to lose. It is to choose a wealth that cannot be confiscated. It is to choose trust over suspicion, simplicity over concealment, peace over appetite, and self-respect over secret profit. It is to train the hand until honesty becomes its natural shape. It is to walk through the world without needing to steal pieces of it in order to feel complete. And when enough such refusals gather in a life, they become a quiet radiance, not the radiance of display, but of integrity. People may not know every choice that formed it, but they feel it. The person becomes clear. Their presence becomes uncomplicated. Their words carry weight because their hands have not betrayed them. They stand on the earth with the humble confidence of one who has not fed on what belongs to another. This is the second door we refuse to enter, the door of taking what has not been given. And in refusing it, we discover that the empty hand is not empty at all. It holds freedom, it holds trust, it holds the untroubled right to sleep. It holds the deep and simple blessing of knowing, what I have is clean, and what is not mine, I can let it be. But there is another temptation more intoxicating than wealth, one that often arrives wearing the mask of romance. It comes softly at first, not as a crime, not as a disaster, not as something that announces itself with thunder. It often comes as a look that lasts a little too long, a message sent a little too late at night, a warmth in the chest that a person has not felt for years. It comes with music in the mind. It comes with excuses already prepared. It comes wearing the face of tenderness, understanding, excitement, and fate. And because it feels alive, the heart begins to defend it. This is what makes desire so dangerous when it crosses the boundaries of trust. If greed often speaks in numbers, desire speaks in poetry. If theft reaches for an object, sexual misconduct reaches for a dream. It tells a person, this is not wrong, this is special, this is what you have been missing, this is the part of you that has been asleep. And when a person is lonely, unappreciated, wounded, bored, or hungry for admiration, those words can feel like medicine. But not everything that feels like medicine is healing. There is a fire called desire. In its rightful place, warmed by respect, protected by commitment, guided by honesty, it can be part of tenderness, intimacy, and human belonging. But when it burns through trust, when it steps over vows, when it uses another person's body or heart, without care for the suffering that will follow, it becomes a fire that consumes the house. It does not only burn the two people who entered it, it burns the unseen rooms as well. The spouse who believed, the children who depended, the friendships that stood around the family like pillars, the quiet dignity of a life that once had a straight path. Sexual misconduct is not simply about desire. Desire by itself is a passing weather in the human body and mind. It rises, it colors the imagination, it pulls attention toward form, voice, scent, memory, possibility. The problem begins when desire violates what should be protected, when it betrays trust, when it breaks commitment, when it ignores consent, when it treats another person not as a whole, being with a future and a woundable heart, but as an instrument for one's hunger, when it crosses moral boundaries that exist not to imprison joy, but to prevent suffering. A boundary may look like a wall to the restless mind, but many boundaries are actually guardrails. They are placed beside cliffs. The immature heart sees only the restriction and says, "Why can I not go there?" The wiser heart looks down and says, "If I go there, who will fall with me?" Forbidden desire is powerful because secrecy feeds it. What is hidden grows brighter in the imagination. A meeting that would seem ordinary in daylight becomes intoxicating when kept in the dark. A message becomes a treasure. A small gesture becomes a sign. The mind, denied the full reality of a person, begins to paint them with colors borrowed from longing. It does not see their impatience, their selfishness, their ordinary habits, their wounds, their complexity. It sees only the chosen angle, the selected sweetness, the reflected image of one's own desire. And then imagination beautifies it. It takes what is incomplete and calls it perfect. It takes what is dangerous and calls it passionate. It takes what is temporary and calls it eternal. It edits out the crying partner, the confused children, the broken home, the disgrace, the awkward lies, the trembling hands, the shame after the sweetness. It edits out the morning after. It edits out the moment when the fantasy becomes a fact, and the fact begins to demand payment. The ego also has its part to play. The ego does not like to say, "I am tempted." That sounds too ordinary, too human. So it says, "This is destiny." It does not like to say, "I want to be admired." So it says, "At last someone truly understands me." It does not like to say, "I am about to betray." So it says, "I deserve happiness." And one by one, the plain words are replaced with beautiful ones, until the person can no longer recognize the old road beneath their feet. There may be a man who has lived many years honorably, or a woman who has carried a family with patience, or someone whose life appears stable from the outside. They are not monsters. They are not looking to destroy anything. They are simply tired. They feel unseen. They have given so much, and somewhere along the way, a part of them has become thirsty. Then someone appears, this person listens. This person laughs at the right moment. This person notices the new shirt, the tired eyes, the silent sadness. They say what has not been said at home for a long time. They bring back the sense of being chosen. The air changes when they enter. The phone lights up and the heart moves toward it before the hand does. A conversation becomes a secret becomes a world, and inside that world, the person feels young, vivid, important, almost reborn. At first they tell themselves there is no harm, it is only talking, only friendship, only a little comfort in a hard life, but the mind knows when it has begun to hide. The body knows when it leans forward. The conscience knows when it must lower its voice. Somewhere beneath the pleasant excitement, there is a small unease, like smoke under a door. Then comes the moment. Perhaps it is a quiet room after everyone else has gone. Perhaps it is a car parked too long in the rain. Perhaps it is a business trip, a hotel corridor, a hand resting where it should not rest. Perhaps it is only the invitation in someone's eyes, clear enough that words are no longer needed. The air is charged, the heart is pounding. Every lonely season, every unmet need, every old disappointment seems to gather and push from behind. And in that moment, the affair looks beautiful. It looks like escape. It looks like proof that one is still desirable. It looks like life after years of duty. It looks like a door into warmth. The person may feel flattered, awakened, even grateful. They may think, how can something that feels this alive be wrong? But if they are still able to listen deeply, beneath the thunder of desire, there is another sound, a quieter sound, the sound of things breaking before they have broken. They may suddenly see the face of the one waiting at home, not as an obstacle, but as a human being who trusted them. They may see the children, if there are children, not understanding the adult language of betrayal, but feeling the earthquake all the same. They may see the family table changed forever, the holidays made tense, the rooms filled with suspicion, the friends forced into sides, the parents aging under sorrow. They may see the future argument, the exposed messages, the silence after confession, the disbelief in someone's eyes. They may also see something even more private, the loss of their own self-respect, because there is a kind of suffering that no one else can measure. It is the suffering of becoming divided within oneself, to smile while hiding, to speak affection while guarding a lie, to sit beside the person one has betrayed and feel the soul shrink, to become clever in deception, skillful in timing, careful with the phone, defensive over small questions. A person may still look success, still dress well, still speak polite lie, still be admired by the world. But inside, the ground is no longer firm. Integrity does not always collapse with noise. Sometimes it corrodes quietly, one small concealment at a time. One deleted message, one invented excuse, one tender lie told to protect a selfish truth, and after a while, the person may not know where sincerity ends and performance begins. They have not only betrayed another, they have taught themselves to live in fragments. This is why the old teachings warn against sexual misconduct so seriously. Not because love is condemned, and not because the body is evil. Affection is not evil. Longing is not evil. But when longing becomes careless, when pleasure is purchased with another person's trust, when one person's excitement becomes many people's suffering, then the sweetness has become poison. A hidden affair often begins with the feeling of being finally understood. But understanding that requires betrayal is not pure understanding. Attention that asks you to become false is not love. Passion that must be fed by someone else's tears is not freedom. It is debt. And sooner or later the debt collector comes. Sometimes the cost is public, a reputation collapses. A family name is dragged into conversation. People whisper. Workplaces become uncomfortable. Communities lose respect. The story travels farther than anyone intended, carried by shock, pity, judgment, and curiosity. The person who once thought they were living a private romance discovers that misconduct never remains as private as desire promises. Sometimes the cost is intimate. A partner can no longer sleep. They replay every memory, wondering what was real. They search old conversations, old photographs, old days on the calendar. Trust, once broken, does not return simply because someone apologizes. It may return slowly, through years of humility, or it may never return in the same form. The betrayed person suffers not only because of what happened, but because the past itself becomes unstable. They ask, "Who was I living with? What did I not see? When you said you loved me, where was your heart?" And children, even when they are not told everything, feel the weather. They feel the coldness between parents. They feel the sudden changes, the anger behind closed doors, the sadness at breakfast, the strange politeness that replaces warmth. A child may not understand desire, but a child understands insecurity. They know when the nest has been shaken. Some wounds enter them before they have words. Friendships can break as well. Those who covered for the affair feel stained by it. Those who warned against it feel ignored. Those who trusted the person feel foolish. A whole web of relationships may be torn because one thread was pulled in secret. That is the nature of moral wrongdoing. It never belongs only to the one who commits it. Its consequences spread beyond the original act, entering lives that did not consent to carry it. Yet the world often romanticizes this very fire. Songs praise it, films soften it, stories call it tragic love, irresistible chemistry, the courage to follow the heart. But the heart is not always wise, simply because it is intense. There are impulses in the heart that lead to generosity, forgiveness, sacrifice, and truth. There are also impulses that lead to ruin. To follow the heart without training, it is like following a horse with no reins along a mountain road. A feeling may be sincere and still be dangerous. A desire may be powerful and still be unworthy of obedience. Two people may truly feel drawn to each other, and yet the right action may be to step back. This is difficult for the modern mind to accept, because we have been taught that authenticity means expressing whatever we feel. But deeper authenticity may mean refusing to let a temporary fire burn down what our better self has vowed to protect. There is dignity in restraint, not coldness, not fear, not repression. Born of true restraint is the strength to see the whole picture. It is the courage to say, "This feeling is real, but it is not my master. This attraction is strong, but it does not have the right to make me cruel. This door is open, but I do not have to enter." Sometimes the most spiritual act is not performed in a temple. It is performed in a hallway. When no one is watching, it is performed with a phone in the hand, choosing not to send the message. It is performed by leaving early, by not taking the second drink, by refusing the private meeting, by turning the conversation back toward clarity before it becomes a net. It is performed by admitting, "I am vulnerable here," and creating distance before the mind begins to negotiate with darkness. A person who refuses such a temptation may not feel heroic in the moment. They may feel foolish, awkward, even painfully deprived. They may walk away with their heart pounding and their body still burning. They may spend the night restless. They may wonder what might have happened. Desire may continue to throw images against the wall of the mind. But beneath all that, something clean remains, something unbroken, something that can look at the morning without hiding. This is why refusal is not emptiness. It is protection. It protects the partner who may never know how close betrayal came. It protects the children who will never have to carry that particular wound. It protects the other person too, because they are not invited into a bond built on harm. It protects the future from being chained to one careless hour, and it protects the soul from becoming a stranger to itself. Of course, there are relationships that are already broken, marriages that are empty, commitments that have become painful or unsafe. But even then, the path of clarity is different from the path of deceit. If a bond must end, let it be ended with honesty, responsibility, and as little cruelty as possible. Do not use secret desire as the knife. Do not begin a new intimacy by planting it in the soil of betrayal. What grows from deception carries the smell of deception, even if the flowers are beautiful at first. The moral boundary is not there to deny love. It is there to ask love to be worthy of its name. If there is truly love, let it not require someone to lie. Let it not demand that children lose peace. Let it not feed on another person's humiliation. Let it not make the beloved smaller, more hidden, more divided, more afraid. Love that begins by asking us to betray our conscience is not lifting us upward. It is asking us to kneel before appetite and call it destiny. And so, when the fire called desire appears, one must learn to pause. Not every warmth is a home. Not every sweetness is nourishment. Not every invitation is a blessing. Some doors are covered in flowers, but behind them is a long descent. The person standing before that door may be trembling. They may feel the pull of beauty, secrecy, danger, and longing. Everything in the blood may say, "Stay." Everything in the fantasy may, "This is your chance." But somewhere deeper, wisdom whispers, "Leave now, while leaving is still possible. Leave before faces are wounded. Leave before words cannot be taken back. Leave before the self you respect becomes the self you must explain." And if that person turns away, the world may never applaud. No one may know the war that was fought in silence. No one may praise the courage it took to walk out of the room, to close the screen, to stop feeding the flame. But the heart knows, the conscience knows, the unseen law of cause and effect knows. On an ordinary battlefield, we often say the winner is the one who remains standing, the one who does not retreat. But the battlefield of desire is strange. Here, the one who stays may be defeated by the very thing they thought they were conquering. And the one who runs away at the right moment, with breath shaken and pride humbled, may be the true victor. There is a kind of courage that does not look like courage at all. It does not raise its voice. It does not stand on a stage. It does not carry a flag or make a grand announcement. Sometimes it is only a person sitting alone in a car, hands still on the steering wheel, deciding not to go inside. Sometimes it is a message left unanswered. Sometimes it is a door not opened, a number deleted, a road not taken, though the heart is burning to take it. And because no one sees it, no one celebrates it. But in the quiet court of conscience, such a moment may be greater than many victories the world praises. The Buddhist teaching on sexual misconduct is not merely about rules placed upon the body. It is about seeing clearly the web of life surrounding desire. It is about understanding that a moment of pleasure is never just a moment when it is built upon betrayal, concealment, broken trust, or the suffering of others. Desire likes to pretend it lives only in the present. It says, "This is only now. This is only between us. This is only feeling." But consequences do not obey that narrow border. They travel. They enter homes. They enter children's eyes. They enter the sleep of husbands and wives. They enter the memory of the one who has done wrong and sit there for years. That is why walking away is not coldness. It is not weakness. It is not lack of passion. Sometimes it is the highest form of compassion available in that hour. To walk away is to admit, this fire may be beautiful, but it can burn down more than I am willing to lose. The saying attributed to Napoleon is powerful because it turns our ordinary idea of victory upside down. On a battlefield, the one who stays, who holds the ground, who refuses to retreat, may be called the victor. The soldier who runs may be called defeated. The world understands that language easily. Stay, conquer, possess. But in the field of forbidden love, the laws are reversed there. The one who remains may not be brave at all. He may simply be captured by craving. She may simply be unable to step back from the sweetness of danger. And the one who leaves, the one who flees, the one who refuses to continue feeding the fantasy, that one may be carrying a courage far deeper than pride, because to flee from temptation is not always fear. Sometimes it is wisdom moving faster than desire. A person may say, "If I walk away, I look weak," but weak before whom? Before the eyes of someone who is inviting us into confusion, before the voice of craving that will disappear once the damage is done, before the ego that wants to prove it can still be wanted, still be chosen, still be alive in the gaze of another. These witnesses are unreliable. They applaud at the door of wrongdoing and vanish at the house of consequence. The true witness is the heart when the noise has ended. There are pleasures that ask only for a little time, but demand a lifetime of explanation. There are embraces that last a few minutes, but leave wounds that do not close for years. There are secret meetings that begin with laughter, but end with suspicion, humiliation, divorce, resentment, and the slow poisoning of trust. The body may call it sweetness, the imagination may call it romance, but if it requires someone to be deceived, if it asks someone to betray a promise, if it survives only in darkness, then wisdom must ask, what kind of sweetness needs so much hiding? Not everything that appears before us is meant for us. This is a very simple truth, but it can save a life. It can save many lives. In the old way of speaking, we might say, look carefully and distinguish between food and offerings. Food may be placed before us to eat. It is proper, it is given, it belongs in the bowl. But offerings are different. They may be fragrant, beautiful, carefully arranged, they may be near enough to touch. Yet they are not ours, they have been set aside. They belong to another purpose, another relationship, another vow, another altar. To reach for them simply because they are within reach is not hunger. It is disrespect, so too with human beings. Some affection is available in the open field of honesty. Some love can be approached with clean hands and a steady heart. But some people, no matter how attractive, no matter how kind, no matter how lonely they appear, are not ours to touch. They are connected to vows, to families, to trust, to histories we may not fully see. They may be someone's spouse, someone's partner, someone's hope, someone's fragile attempt to rebuild life. And even if they themselves are confused, even if they invite us closer, our clarity must be stronger than their confusion. This is where moral life becomes very real. It is easy to speak of virtue when nothing tempts us. It is easy to say, "I would never," when the heart is calm and the situation is far away. But then one day, life arranges a meeting. A conversation becomes warmer than it should. A glance stays a little too long. A complaint about one's marriage becomes an opening. A sense of being understood becomes intoxicating. The mind begins to weave a story. Maybe this is different. Maybe this is fate. Maybe I deserve happiness. Maybe no one will be hurt. That is the moment to wake up. Not later when the attachment is already deep. Not later when lies have already begun. Not later when the heart has built a private world and decorated it with excuses. Wake up when the first thread is being tied. Wake up when the first secret gives you a strange thrill. Wake up when you notice that you are hiding a message, changing your tone, waiting for someone's name to appear on the screen. The beginning of misconduct is often very small. It may not yet be the body. It may be the imagination given permission to build a room where it should not live. It may be emotional dependence hidden under the word friendship. It may be a private tenderness that you would not speak openly before the person who trusts you. The hand has not yet reached, but the heart has begun to lean. If we are honest, we know. The conscience knows the difference between clean affection and dangerous intimacy. It may speak it's soft, it speaks. Be careful. This road is not empty. There are people standing further down this road whom you cannot yet see. Restraint protects those people. When we refuse sexual misconduct, we are not only protecting our own morality, as if morality were a private possession, we are protecting the peace of many homes. We are protecting someone's trust from being shattered. We are protecting children. from the silent weather of adult betrayal. We are protecting a spouse from the pain of comparing themselves to a secret. We are protecting the dignity of the person who tempts us, because we refuse to help them fall further into confusion. And we are protecting ourselves from becoming divided inside. That division is one of the hidden sufferings of wrongdoing. A person who lives in betrayal must split the self into compartments. One face here, another face there. One story for the family, another story for the secret place. One version of the phone, one version of the heart. And slowly, the mind becomes tired. Even pleasure becomes anxious because it must be guarded. Even affection becomes fear because it depends on concealment. A sound, a question, an unexpected arrival. A forgotten message on a screen. All of it becomes a threat. What kind of happiness must tremble so much? True happiness can breathe. It does not need constant editing. It does not need lies arranged like walls around it. It does not ask us to become smaller, sneakier, harder, more skilled at deception. Real love may have difficulties, but it does not require the destruction of another person's trust as its foundation. Real tenderness does not need us to step over vows as if they were old ropes on the ground. This is why the one who walks away is victorious. Not because they feel nothing. If they felt nothing, there would be no battle. The victory is meaningful precisely because something in them wanted to stay. The pulse was real. The attraction was real. The imagination was already painting beautiful scenes. The body had its argument. The loneliness had its argument. The ego had its argument. And still, through all those voices, a deeper wisdom rose and said, "No, not this way. Not at this cost." There are moments when the word no is a sacred word. It may sound harsh to the ear, but it can be merciful to the future. No can close a door that would have led to years of regret. No can preserve a marriage from a wound it might not survive. No can allow a confused person to return to themselves. No can keep one's own heart from entering a debt that cannot be easily paid. To say no at the right time is to bow to all the unseen lives connected to the moment, and often, no one will understand the nobility of that refusal. The person being refused may feel rejected. Friends may laugh and say, "Why are you so serious? Life is short." The mind itself may return again and again, wondering what might have happened. But the path of goodness cannot depend on applause. Many of the most important victories in a human life are invisible. They are not recorded in public history. They are recorded in character. A person becomes trustworthy by refusing what is not theirs. Again and again, money, not only possessions, but also bodies, affections, private spaces, emotional loyalty. To be trustworthy is to be safe for others. It means another person can leave their peace near us and not fear that we will steal it. It means a friend can bring us into their home and not fear our eyes. It means a spouse can rest because we are not secretly opening doors behind their back. It means our presence does not become a danger to the promises of others. There is great beauty in being such a person. In a world that often praises conquest, seduction, excitement, and the thrill of the forbidden, there is a quiet nobility in self-restraint. It does not make the heart dry. It makes the heart clean. It does not deny love. It protects love from being confused with appetite. It does not despise the body. It understands that the body, without wisdom, can become a doorway to suffering. And with wisdom, the same body can become an instrument of kindness, loyalty, and care. The Buddha did not teach restraint because life should be joyless. He taught restraint because he saw how beings suffer when craving governs the mind. Craving promises freedom but often leads to bondage. It promises intimacy but often produces loneliness. It promises sweetness but leaves bitterness behind. And when the sweetness fades, karma remains, memory remains, faces remain. The knowledge of what we have done remains. No one can truly escape the witness within. So we train ourselves before the great temptation arrives. We do not wait until the storm is at its strongest to decide whether the house needs foundations. We practice modesty in small conversations. We practice honesty with our own motives. We do not water fantasies that should be allowed to dry. We keep respectful distances where distance is needed. We do not pretend that we are beyond danger. Humility is protection. The person who says, "I could never fall," may already be standing too close to the edge. Better to know the human heart as it is, tender, hungry, easily flattered, easily wounded, easily confused. When attention arrives at the right lonely hour, knowing this, we become gentle but firm with ourselves. We do not hate desire, but we do not hand it the steering wheel. We do not condemn the heart for feeling, but we teach it where not to dwell. We do not need to turn every attraction into a story, every warmth into a secret, every possibility into an action. Many things can arise in the mind and pass away if we do not invite them to sit down and unpack their bags. A thought is not yet a sin, a feeling is not yet a fall, but feeding it, decorating it, hiding it, returning to it with delight, while knowing it leads toward harm, that is where the path begins to darken. And if we have already fallen, then the teaching is not a stone thrown at us. It is a lamp, it says. See clearly, stop adding fuel, tell the truth where truth must be told, accept the consequence, repair what can be repaired, and do not make suffering into a lifestyle. Shame alone cannot purify a life, but honest remorse, restraint, and a sincere change of direction can begin to cleanse the heart. Still, the cleanest wound is the one we never create. The simplest suffering is the one we prevent before it takes form. That is why walking away is so precious. It is prevention. It is wisdom arriving before disaster. It is compassion acting before tears. It is the courage to lose a fantasy in order to preserve reality. It is the strength to let the heart ache for a while, rather than make many hearts bleed for a long time. If we look deeply, every forbidden pleasure asks us a question. Will you sacrifice tomorrow for me? And every act of restraint answers, no, tomorrow is not mine alone. Other people live there too. That answer is noble. It remembers the unseen spouse. It remembers the child sleeping in the next room. It remembers the trust that took years to build. It remembers one's own spiritual path. It remembers that heaven and hell are not only places after death. They begin as conditions of the heart. A mind full of deception, fear, lust, and regret is already tasting a lower realm. A mind that has resisted harm, even through trembling, already knows something of a higher one. So when desire stands before us dressed as beauty, we must look twice. Is this food or is it an offering? Is this truly given or merely available? Is this love or hunger-wearing perfume? Is this path open, or does it pass through someone else's sorrow? If it is not ours, we bow and step back. If it belongs to another vow, we do not touch. If it can only live in secrecy, we let it die in silence, and in that silence, though no drum is beaten, though no medal is placed upon the chest, something luminous is preserved. The heart remains whole. The hands remain clean. The eyes can meet the world without lowering themselves. That is victory. After the body that may harm, and the hand that may take, and the desire that may betray, we come now to the smallest instrument of all, yet one that can create enormous suffering. It has no blade, and yet it can wound. It carries no weight, and yet it can destroy trust, divide families, mislead minds, and darken the path of many lives. The tongue is small, but it is not weak. A few words can comfort a dying person. A few words can restore courage to someone who has almost given up. A few words can reconcile two hearts that have stood apart for years. But the same tongue, when it leaves the ground of truth, can become a quiet fire. It does not always burn loudly. Sometimes it burns inside a home, inside a friendship, inside a community. And by the time people smell the smoke, the walls of trust have already turned black. When we speak of lying, we are not speaking only of grand deceptions, forged documents, false witnesses, or carefully planned betrayals. Those are obvious enough. that even a child can recognize their danger. The lie that ruins the heart often begins much smaller. It begins as a slight turn away from what we know. It begins as a sentence shaped not to reveal reality, but to hide it. It begins when we know one thing and intentionally lead another person to believe something else. That is the root of false speech. Not merely saying words that are inaccurate, but using speech to pull someone away from what we understand to be true. Sometimes we lie for profit, sometimes for fear. Sometimes because we want to appear better, wiser, kinder, more innocent, more successful than we are. Sometimes we lie because we do not want to face the discomfort of another person's disappointment. Sometimes we lie because we want control. And sometimes, more quietly, we lie because we have become accustomed to decorating ourselves with illusions. A lie may wear many clothes. It may sound like an excuse. It may sound like politeness. It may sound like humility. It may sound like concern. It may even sound spiritual, if the speaker has learned how to use noble language for selfish purposes. But if the intention is to mislead, then the tongue has left the path. It does not matter whether the words are gentle or harsh, elegant or simple. The danger lies in the direction. Truth brings the mind closer to reality. Falsehood leads it away. And because lying often begins with something useful, it does not feel dangerous at first. That is why it is so easy to underestimate. A person is late, and instead of saying, "I did not manage my time well," he says, "The traffic was terrible." Perhaps there was traffic, but not enough to explain the delay. A person makes a mistake at work, and instead of admitting, "I overlooked this," she says, "No one told me clearly." A child breaks a cup and says, "It fell by itself." A message, a habit, a meeting, and says, "Nothing happened." These are not always dramatic lies. No thunder shakes the sky after they are spoken. The room remains the same, day continues. People eat, work, sleep, and the lie seems to have passed through the world without consequence. But something has happened. The speaker has discovered that reality can be bent for convenience. The mind has learned a shortcut. Instead of carrying the discomfort of truth, it can manufacture a door and slip away. Instead of standing in the open, it can put on a mask. And once that shortcut works, the mind remembers. The next time pressure comes, the tongue is faster. The next time shame arises, invention appears more easily. The next time someone asks a direct question, the mind no longer looks first for truth. It looks for escape. This is why the old saying carries such weight. A habit is made by repetition. People often say, "A thief becomes used to stealing," as if theft alone has this power. But every repeated act trains the hand, the mouth, the eyes, the mind. What we do again and again becomes easier to do again. If we rehearse anger, anger becomes ready. If we rehearse generosity, generosity becomes natural. If we rehearse deception, deception becomes a familiar room. At first we enter with hesitation, later we enter without noticing. The lie that seems small is dangerous because it saves face too quickly. It protects the image before the conscience has time to speak. We all know the uncomfortable heat of being seen as imperfect. No one enjoys being caught in carelessness, selfishness, ignorance, or weakness. There is a moment, very brief, when the truth stands at the door and asks to be allowed in. At that exact moment, the lie offers another way. It says, "You do not have to feel this. You do not have to lose respect. You do not have to disappoint anyone. Just say this one thing, and if we obey it, we may indeed escape that moment. The other person may believe us. The conversation may end. The embarrassment may pass. But the price is not gone. It has only moved inward. A person who lies must now keep company with two worlds, the world as it is, and the world as he has described it. From then on, he must remember both. He must remember what happened and what he said happened. He must remember who knows what, who heard which version, which detail was invented, which date was changed, which emotion was performed. The mind which was made to meet reality clearly is forced to become a clerk in a warehouse of masks. This is a heavy way to live. Even when no one discovers the liar is divided. One part knows, another part performs. One part stands in the room, another part watches from behind the curtain, anxious that the curtain may fall. And the more lies there are, the more divided the person becomes. The face smiles, but the chest tightens. The mouth speaks, but the mind calculates. The body sits among friends, but the heart cannot rest fully, because rest belongs to those who do not need to defend an illusion. Truthfulness, then, is not merely a social virtue. It is also a kind of inner simplicity. A truthful person may still suffer. He may still be misunderstood. He may still make mistakes, lose arguments, and face the consequences of his actions. But he does not have to carry the extra burden of fabrication. He does not have to build a second life in order to protect the first. There is dignity in that. There is peace in that. Even when truth is painful, it has a clean pain. A lie has a dirty comfort. And beyond the inner harm, false speech wounds the world outside us. Trust is one of the most delicate things human beings can give each other. We cannot hold it in the hand, but every relationship depends on it. A child trusts a parent's words before understanding the world. A patient trusts a doctor, a student trusts a teacher, a friend trusts a friend, a husband, a wife, a business partner, a community, a society. All of them are held together by the invisible thread that what is said is not deliberately false. When that thread breaks, the damage is not limited to the single sentence that broke it. Trust, once injured, begins to question backward and forward. The person who has been deceived does not only ask, "Was that statement false?" They begin to ask, "What else was false? When did it begin? How much of what I believed was real? Was I foolish? Was I used? Did I give my heart to a mask?" This is why one lie can make 10 years tremble. It reaches into memories and stains them with doubt. And rebuilding trust is not like replacing a cracked bowl with a new one. Sometimes people say, "I apologized. Why can't they forget?" But trust does not return simply because the liar is tired of being distrusted. Trust returns slowly, if it returns at all, through long patience, clear conduct, repeated honesty, and the willingness to let the wounded person heal at their own pace. The one who lied may want the matter to be over quickly, but the one who was lied to has to rebuild their sense of reality. That takes time. A lie may last only a breath, but its echo can last for years. This is especially true when lying is used to guide another person's choices. If someone asks us for direction, and we intentionally mislead them, we do not merely speak falsely, we interfere with their path. We place fog in front of their eyes. We may cause them to trust the wrong person, reject the right one, make a harmful decision, or lose faith in something wholesome. False speech is not only the sound of untruth, it is the act of reshaping another person's perception without their consent. That is why lies spoken from positions of influence are especially dangerous. A parent who constantly lies teaches a child not only false facts, but false living. A leader who lies weakens the moral spine of a whole group. A teacher who lies corrupts learning. A spiritual person who lies in the language of compassion can wound faith itself. People do not always lose faith because truth is too difficult. Sometimes they lose faith because someone used sacred words to hide selfish intentions. Even ordinary exaggeration can slowly blur the mind. We may not intend great harm when we enlarge a story to sound more impressive, when we pretend to know what we do not know, when we speak with certainty about things we have not examined. But each time we do this, we train ourselves to value effect over truth. We begin to care more about how words land than whether they are clean. We begin to prefer applause to accuracy, control to honesty, appearance to reality, and the tongue becomes a servant of the ego. How many lies are born simply from the wish to be admired? We want to be seen as successful, so we hide our struggles. We want to be seen as generous, so we exaggerate what we have done. We want to be seen as loyal, So we deny the resentment we have fed in secret. We want to be seen as pure, so we cover the places where we are still confused. Yet the self that must be protected by falsehood is a fragile self. It cannot breathe in daylight. It needs dim rooms, careful angles, selected stories. But the path of goodness asks us to love truth more than our image. Not brutally, not foolishly, not with the harshness that uses honesty as an excuse to injure others. Truthfulness does not mean throwing every thought into the world without compassion. A truthful person still knows timing, gentleness, silence, and care. There are words that may be true but unnecessary. There are confessions that must be made wisely. There are private matters that do not belong to every ear. But restraint is not the same as deception. Silence can protect dignity. A lie protects illusion. Sometimes the most truthful thing we can say is, "I am not ready to speak about that," or "I do not know," or "I made a mistake," or "I cannot promise what you are asking." These sentences may feel small, but they are pillars. They keep the house from leaning. They may not impress anyone, but they preserve the soul. To refuse a lie is not always easy. There are moments when truth costs us something. It may cost comfort. It may cost reputation. It may cost money. It may cost someone's approval. The opportunity to lie may stand before us like an open gate. If we step through, we can avoid blame, gain advantage, win sympathy, escape its consequences, and no one may ever know. But at that gate, a spiritual decision is being made. Not in the sky, not in some distant court, but in the immediate chamber of the heart. Will I live in reality, or will I train myself away from it? This question is simple but not small, because the one who becomes comfortable with falsehood becomes less able to recognize truth even within himself. He may begin by lying to others, but eventually he lies inwardly. He tells himself his greed is necessity, his cruelty is honesty, his cowardice is prudence, his attachment is love, his jealousy is concern. When speech becomes false, perception soon follows. The world is no longer seen as it is, but as the ego needs it to be. That is a dark road. But the reverse is also true. If lies become easy through repetition, then truthfulness must also be practiced until it becomes natural. We do not become truthful merely by admiring truth in beautiful words. We become truthful in the small moments, when an excuse rises and we let it fall, when exaggeration tempts us and we speak plainly, when fear tightens the throat and we still admit what must be admitted, when we do not know and we say we do not know, when silence is wiser than invention. At first, this may feel awkward. The tongue may tremble. The old habit may reach for decoration. The mind may panic and say, "If you tell the truth, they will think less of you." But slowly something changes. We discover that many truths we feared are survivable. We discover that humility does not kill us. We discover that people may trust us more when we admit our limits than when we pretend to have none. We discover that a clean word brings a quiet strength. Truthfulness is not a luxury for saints. It is a daily discipline for anyone who wants to be whole. It is how the heart returns to one piece. It is how relationships become worthy of rest. It is how communities stop poisoning themselves with suspicion. And it is one of those refusals that may look ordinary from the outside, but carries immense spiritual weight. To have the chance to lie and not lie. To have the chance to mislead and not mislead. To have the chance to gain by confusion and instead make things clear. To have the chance to save face through falsehood and instead accept the plainness of truth. These are not minor victories. They are doors we refuse to enter, and each refusal leaves the mind a little brighter. Each honest word sets down a burden. Each moment of truth gathers strength for the next. In this way, the path is not built only by great vows made in temples or solemn promises spoken before others. It is built in kitchens, offices, phone calls, messages, apologies, explanations, and quiet answers given when no one is watching. The tongue is small, yes, but when it bows to truth, it becomes a lamp, and a lamp, however small, can keep a person from walking into darkness. And perhaps this is why the training of speech is so subtle. It does not begin only when we stand before a crowd, or when our words are recorded, or when someone asks us a serious question and waits for an answer. It begins in the small spaces where the mind quietly calculates. It begins when a person asks, "Did you do this?" And in one instant we see two roads. One road protects our image, the other protects our integrity. It begins when a story can be slightly changed, when a fact can be conveniently omitted, when an intention can be made to look purer than it really was. It begins when silence would be more honest than a performance. And yet we feel the temptation to perform. The Buddha's teaching is direct, but it reaches very deep. To refuse the chance to lie is already a path upward, not because the heavens are impressed by beautiful speech, but because truth cleans the place where karma is made. The mind. A lie may seem to happen only on the lips, but before it reaches the lips, it has already disturbed the heart. The mind must first separate itself from reality. It must decide, this is what happened, but I will present something else. It must carry two versions at once, the real and the invented. And even if no one discovers the falsehood, the one who speaks it must live with the split. This is the hidden suffering of lying. It forces the mind to become divided. One part remembers the truth, another part guards the story. One part knows the facts, another part rehearses the disguise. After some time, a person may not even notice the weight anymore, just as someone carrying a heavy bag for a long distance may begin to think that this heaviness is normal. But the heaviness is still there. It bends the posture of the soul. And when a person refuses to lie, even in a situation where lying would be easy, something straightens within them. There is a quiet dignity in saying what is true. There is a quiet freedom in not needing to remember what was fabricated. There is a quiet rest in having nothing to hide, nothing to polish, nothing to defend beyond what actually is. Truth may bring discomfort for a moment, but it often removes a much longer suffering. This does not mean that truthful speech is harsh speech. This is an important point because many people misunderstand honesty. They think truth gives them permission to wound. They say, "I am just being honest," while throwing words like stones. But truth, in the noble sense, is not cruelty dressed in clean clothing. Truth is not a weapon used to show superiority. Truth is not the habit of exposing every fault, every weakness, every private matter simply because it's factually correct. Right speech asks more of us than blunt accuracy. It asks whether the words are true, but also whether they are beneficial. It asks whether the timing is wise. It asks whether the heart is kind. It asks whether we are speaking to heal, to clarify, to protect, to guide, or whether we are speaking to punish, embarrass, and satisfy our own irritation. A truthful tongue is not merely a tongue that refuses falsehood. It is a tongue trained by compassion. There are truths that must be spoken gently, because the person receiving them is already fragile. There are truths that must be spoken firmly, because delay would allow harm to continue. There are truths that must wait, because the moment is too heated and the mind of the listener is closed. There are truths that need only a few words, because too many words would turn clarity into pressure. And there are truths that can be spoken without humiliating anyone, if the speaker has patience and humility. So the training is not simple in the sense of being shallow. It is simple in the sense of being pure. Do not lie, do not twist, do not mislead, do not use speech to build a fog around reality. But within that commitment, learn the art of speaking as one human being caring for another. Learn to say, "This is what I saw," without exaggerating. Learn to say, "This is what I feel," without blaming the whole world. Learn to say, "I was wrong," without decorating the apology. Learn to say, "I do not know," without Learn to say, "I cannot promise that," without pretending. These are small sentences, but they can save a life from confusion. The old saying tells us that the hand becomes accustomed to stealing the eye becomes accustomed to sleeping. But this is not only true of theft or laziness. Everything repeated becomes easier. Every action leaves a groove. Every word trains the next word. Every little excuse prepares the tongue for a bigger excuse. Every small distortion makes the mind more comfortable with distortion. At first, a lie may cause fear. The heart beats faster. The person worries they will be found out. But after repeating it many times, the fear grows weaker. The lie becomes smooth. The tongue learns the path. The face learns the expression. The conscience, if ignored long enough, grows quiet. This is a very dangerous thing, not because conscience truly dies, but because we become skilled at not listening. A person may begin with a small lie to avoid discomfort, then another lie to protect the first, then another lie to gain advantage, then another lie to control how others see them after a while. Speech is no longer a bridge to reality. It becomes a curtain. Words no longer reveal the heart, they hide it, and the person may become clever but not free. In the same way, every truth repeated also becomes easier. The first honest confession may tremble. The first refusal to exaggerate may feel like losing something. The first admission of ignorance may bruise the pride. The first apology without excuses may feel like standing naked in cold wind. But if repeated, truth becomes natural. The mind begins to prefer simplicity. The body no longer tightens so much when honesty is required. The tongue learns to return to what is real. And slowly, the person becomes trustworthy, not by reputation alone, but by the texture of their being. We all know the difference between a person whose words are slippery and a person whose words have ground beneath them. With some people, every sentence must be weighed. We listen and wonder, what are they leaving out? What are they trying to get from me? Is this the whole story? Even their compliments make us cautious. Even their promises feel uncertain. Around such speech, the heart cannot rest. But with a truthful person, the atmosphere changes. Their words do not have to be loud. They do not have to be poetic. They may speak simply, even quietly. Yet we feel safe, because their speech is not a trap. Their words are not decorations covering emptiness. Their words are not weapons sharpened by ego. Their words are bridges to reality. We can cross them without fear that the planks will break beneath our feet. Such a person becomes a refuge. Not because they know everything, but because they do not pretend to know what they do not know. Not because they never make mistakes, but because when they do not bury the mistake under more mistakes. Not because their speech is always pleasant, but because even difficult words from them carry the scent of responsibility. They are careful with the trust of others. They understand that speech can guide a mind toward light or push it deeper into darkness. To mislead someone is a grave thing. It is not only the act of saying what is false, it is the act of bending another person's perception. It is placing a wrong map in their hands and allowing them to walk. If someone trusts us and we use that trust to confuse them, we have harmed more than their ears. We have interfered with their ability to choose wisely. We have made their world less clear. And if they act based on our falsehood, then our words continue traveling through their life, producing consequences long after the conversation has ended. This is why refusing to lie is not merely personal purity. It is compassion, it is restraint, it is protection. When we refuse to lie, we protect others from being trapped in our fear, our greed, our vanity, our desire to escape responsibility. We allow them the dignity of reality. We do not steal their right to understand what is actually happening. We do not turn their trust into a tool for our convenience. Of course, there are times when truth costs us. Sometimes honesty means losing praise. Sometimes it means returning something we could have kept. Sometimes it means admitting a fault before anyone else notices. Sometimes it means disappointing someone who expected us to say yes. Sometimes it means standing alone while others prefer a comforting falsehood. But each time we choose truth, we are also choosing the kind of person we are becoming. A life is not shaped only by the dramatic moments. It is shaped by repetition. The roads of heaven and hell are not built in one day. They are paved with tendencies. They are paved with what we allow ourselves to do, again and again, until it feels like home. If we repeatedly choose deception, then deception becomes our road. If we repeatedly choose clarity, then clarity becomes our road. The destination is not separate from the steps. The steps are already the destination forming beneath our feet. This is why a single moment of refusing to lie should not be dismissed. A person may think, "It was nothing, I only told the truth because I was asked." But in the inner life, it is not nothing, it is training. It is the mind learning that it does not need falsehood to survive. It is the heart learning that shame can be endured, that consequences can be faced, that dignity is more valuable than appearance. It is a seed, and if watered again and again, that seed becomes character. When we speak truthfully, we also begin to see ourselves more clearly. Lies do not only confuse others, they confuse the liar. If we repeatedly present ourselves as kinder, wiser, more innocent, more generous, or more victimized than we are, eventually we may begin to live inside that false portrait. We defend an image instead of transforming the heart. We ask others to believe in a self that does not exist. And then we become angry when reality refuses to cooperate. But truth brings us back. It says, "Stand here. This is where you are. From here you can walk." There is great mercy in that. Truth may expose our faults, but it also gives us a real place to begin. A lie may protect the ego, but it leaves the wound untreated. Truth may sting, but it allows repentance. It allows reconciliation. It allows learning. Without truth, even spiritual practice becomes performance. We may bow, chant, pray, speak of compassion, speak of wisdom. But if the tongue is trained in deception, the foundation is cracked. The outer form may remain beautiful, but the inner house is unsafe. Training the tongue in truth is therefore not separate from training the mind. Before a lie is spoken, there is usually fear. Fear of blame, fear of loss, fear of looking small, fear of being unloved. Sometimes there is greed, the desire to gain something through false appearance. Sometimes there is hatred, the wish to damage someone through accusation or slander. Sometimes there is delusion. The mind persuades itself that a falsehood is harmless, necessary, even clever. To stop the lie at the mouth is good. To understand the roots beneath it is deeper still. When we notice the urge to lie, we can pause and ask, what am I protecting? If we are protecting pride, maybe pride does not need such protection. If we are protecting greed, maybe that gain is not worth the loss of integrity. If we are protecting comfort, maybe discomfort is the teacher we need. If we are protecting an image, maybe the image is a prison. In this pause, freedom appears. The old habit may pull strongly, but it is not absolute. We can refuse. We can choose differently. We can let truth pass through the mouth, even if the voice shakes. And when this is practiced over time, speech becomes lighter. We begin to use fewer unnecessary words. We become less interested in exaggeration. We do not need to make ourselves the center of every story. We do not need to reshape every event so that we appear completely right. We can listen without preparing a defense. We can answer without manipulating. We can remain silent without hiding the tongue once this begins to serve wisdom. This kind of speech bless household. In a home where people tell the truth with kindness, children learn reality without terror. Partners can repair what is broken because nothing has to be buried forever. Parents can admit mistakes and still remain worthy of respect. Friends can disagree and still feel safe. Communities can solve problems because the facts are not constantly being bent by personal interest. Truth becomes the clean water in which relationships can breathe. And on the spiritual path, truthful speech becomes a lamp carried forward. It does not shout, it does not boast, it simply shines. A person who refuses to lie may not think they are doing anything extraordinary. They may only be answering honestly, refusing to deceive, choosing clarity over convenience. But in the unseen field of karma, this is profound. Each truthful word is a release from darkness. Each refusal to mislead is a step away from the lower road. Each honest response plants the mind in a realm of brightness. Now the four teachings begin to reveal a single deeper principle. Every repeated choice becomes a road. To refuse killing is to train the heart in mercy. To refuse stealing is to train the hand in contentment. To refuse sexual misconduct is to train desire in responsibility. To refuse lying is to train the tongue in truth. None of these refusals is empty. Each one shapes the person who refuses. Each one closes a door to suffering and opens another door toward peace. And if we keep walking, one honest step after another, we begin to understand that heaven is not only a place reached after death, it is also a direction of the mind, formed every time we choose not to betray what is real. There is an old saying that a thief becomes used to stealing, just as a person who sleeps late becomes used to lying in bed. People say it casually, sometimes with a smile, as if they are speaking only about a small weakness of human nature. But, if we listen more carefully, there is a deep and frightening truth inside it. The hand becomes familiar with what it repeats. The mouth becomes familiar with what it says again and again. The heart becomes familiar with whatever it allows itself to feel, defend, and excuse. And this is not only true of stealing. It is not only true of obvious crimes, or visible sins, or those actions that society points at and names as wrong. Every repeated action becomes a road. Every repeated thought becomes a climate. Every repeated permission becomes a room in which the mind begins to live. If we repeat anger, anger becomes available more quickly. If we repeat greed, greed no longer needs to knock before entering. If we repeat deception, the tongue begins to move before conscience has time to stand up. But if we repeat restraint, restraint also becomes familiar. If we repeat mercy, mercy becomes easier to find. If we repeat honesty, truth becomes less frightening. If we repeat contentment, the hand grows lighter and stops reaching for what does not belong to it. Habit is the hidden road beneath our life. We think we are making separate choices, one by one, disconnected from each other. Today I say, one lie, tomorrow I take one small thing. Another day I harm one living being because it is convenient. Another day I step into a forbidden affection. Because no one will know, we tell ourselves that each moment is isolated, that it does not define us, that it will pass and leave no mark. But the mind does not live that way. The mind remembers, the body remembers, the nerves remember, the conscience remembers. Even when we try to silence it, what is done once becomes easier to do again. What is excused once asks to be excused twice. What is hidden once teaches us how to hide better the next time. This is why the teachings of the Buddha are not merely commandments given from the outside. They are observations about the inner mechanics of suffering and liberation. When he warns against killing, stealing, sexual misconduct and false speech, he is not simply describing punishments after death. He is showing us how the mind descends. He is showing us how a person becomes capable of darkness, not in a single dramatic moment, but through the slow training of the heart in carelessness. No one becomes cruel all at once. At first, one looks away from the pain of another being. Then one does it again. Then one says, "It is nothing." Then one says, "Everyone does it." Then one says, "They deserved it." And by then the heart has changed its texture. It has grown a skin over the place where tenderness used to be. The same is true with taking what has not been given. At first there is a nervous feeling, a small trembling in the hand, a quick look to see if anyone notices, then comes relief. Then comes pleasure, then comes confidence. Eventually the person no longer feels that they are stealing. They feel clever, they feel entitled, they feel wronged if they are stopped. In the same way, Desire becomes dangerous when it is trained to ignore consequence. A person does not fall into misconduct only because of beauty, temptation, or loneliness. They fall because somewhere before the fall, they practiced saying yes to thoughts they knew were not clean. They entertained fantasies. They fed secret conversations. They let the mind return again and again to what should have been left alone. By the time the body moves, the road has already been built inside, and lying is no different. The first lie may burn the throat. The second lie comes with less heat. The third comes with skill. Then the person begins to lie not only to others, but to themselves. They do not merely speak falsely. They begin to inhabit falsehood. This is the danger of habit. It does not only repeat behavior, it reshapes perception. When the mind is trained in harm, it begins to see the world in a way that permits harm. When it is trained in greed, it begins to see other people's possessions as opportunities. When it is trained in lust without responsibility, it begins to see human beings as entrances into pleasure, rather than lives with families, wounds, dignity, and consequences. When it is trained in lying, it begins to see truth as optional, sincerity as weakness, and trust as something to be used. Habit is not neutral. It does not simply sit in the background like furniture in a room. It directs what we notice. It prepares our excuses before we even need them. It places certain words near the tongue and certain impulses near the hand. It tells the eyes where to look and tells the heart what to ignore. A habit is like a path through grass. The first time we walk through, the grass bends only slightly. The second time, the line becomes visible. After many crossings, the earth is exposed. Then one day, without thinking, the feet go there by themselves. This is why restraint is so precious. Restraint is not weakness. It is not the failure to act. It is the deliberate building of another road. When there is a chance to kill, and we do not kill, something in the heart becomes softer and stronger at the same time. When there is a chance to steal, and we do not steal, the hand learns to remain clean even in secret. When there is a chance to betray love, marriage, trust, or dignity, and we step away, desire learns that it is not the master. When there is a chance to lie and we choose the truth, even if the voice shakes, the tongue learns its proper home. People often admire great transformations. They like stories where someone wakes up one day and becomes new. But most real transformation is not so dramatic. It happens quietly, almost invisibly. A person becomes honest by telling the truth in many small moments when lying would have been easier. A person becomes compassionate by refusing to harm in many small moments when harming would have been convenient. A person becomes faithful by turning away again and again from doors that promise sweetness but lead to ruin. A person becomes pure not because temptation never appears, but because each refusal leaves a trace of strength behind. There was once a man who, in his later years, looked back on his life with a kind of astonishment. People around him called him trustworthy. His children came to him for advice. His friends left their money with him without fear. Even strangers, after speaking with him, sensed that he would not twist their words or take advantage of their need. But one evening, sitting alone, after a funeral, he asked himself, "When did I become this kind of man?" He tried to find the day. Was it when he returned the wallet he found in the market? Was it when he refused an affair that had almost swallowed him? Was it when he told the truth in court, though it cost him a promotion? Was it when he stopped his younger brother from killing a snake just for sport? He searched his memory, but no single moment seemed large enough. Then he began to see that he had not become trustworthy in one day. He had become so through thousands of moments no one applauded. He remembered being a boy in a shop, with a coin lying near the edge of a counter. No one saw it. His fingers moved toward it, and then something in him pulled back. He remembered being a teenager, when friends mocked him for not joining them in tormenting a wounded bird. He remembered being a young husband, tired and flattered by the attention of someone who was not his wife. And how his heart raced when he realized that the door was open, truly open. If only he stepped through. He remembered leaving before the conversation became a fire. He remembered the lies he almost told. Small lies, useful lies, lies that would have made him look better. Avoid blame, win approval, escape discomfort. Some he told, and the shame of them stayed with him. Some he swallowed before they formed. And he realized that the man people trusted was not born from pride. He was shaped by many little battles he had not always won. But whenever he lost, he suffered from the taste of it. Whenever he won, peace remained afterward like cool water. Then he thought of another man he had known in youth, a friend who began with small thefts and playful deceptions. At first everyone laughed. He was charming, quick, clever with words. If he cheated in a game, he made it seem like comedy. If he took something, he said he was only borrowing. If he lied so smoothly that people almost admired him. But years passed, and the laughter disappeared. The small thefts became larger. The lies became webs. The charm became manipulation. His relationships broke one by one. By the end, he no longer seemed wicked in a dramatic way. He seemed trapped. He had walked so long on one road that he no longer believed another road existed. That night, the old man understood something with great tenderness and fear. Heaven and hell were not only places waiting somewhere beyond the last breath. They were also directions begun here. They were climates the mind gradually enters. Each repeated harm carried the mind toward heat, fear, hunger, suspicion, and loneliness. Each repeated restraint carried the mind toward clarity, dignity, calm, and openness. One road tightened the heart, the other released it. One made the world feel like a battlefield of appetite. The other made the world feel like a place where life could be protected. This does not mean that a person who has done wrong is condemned forever. If habits are roads, then roads can be left. But leaving a road requires more than regret. It requires walking differently, again and again, until the new path becomes real beneath the feet. A liar must practice truth not only when it is convenient, but especially when it costs something. A thief must practice contentment, not only when there is nothing to take, but when something unguarded lies within reach. A person prone to harming must practice reverence for life, not only when life is beautiful, but when life is irritating, small, helpless, or in the way. A person caught in misconduct must practice guarding the senses. Before the body is already at the edge of the fall, there remains a fourth door, quieter than the other three, and for that reason more dangerous. It asks nothing of the hands. It asks nothing of the feet. It requires only the tongue, or sometimes not even that, only a silence shaped carefully enough to mislead. There was a woman who sold vegetables at the edge of a market town, at a stall she had inherited from her mother. She was known for arriving before sunrise and for weighing everything twice, because her mother had taught her that a scale does not lie unless a hand makes it lie. For many years she was proud of this. Customers trusted her stall above the others. Mothers sent their children to buy from her because they knew the coins would return the correct amount of change, and the basket would return the correct weight of onions. One season the rains came late, and then came all at once, and half of what she had planted rotted in the field before it could be picked. Money grew thin. Her husband had been unwell for months, and the medicine he needed cost more than the vegetables could earn. She began to lie awake at night, doing arithmetic that never came out even, no matter how many times she rearranged the numbers in her head. It was a small thing that began it. A customer, distracted by a crying child, did not watch the scale closely. The woman's thumb rested, almost without her permission, on the edge of the tray. Not hard, not enough to be seen, just enough to turn a slightly light bundle into a bundle that read as full. The customer paid, thanked her, and left. Nothing happened. No bell rang in the sky. No neighbor turned to stare. The woman stood there with the coins in her hand, and the market continued exactly as it had continued. Every day of her life, the same shouting of prices, the same smell of crushed herbs and diesel smoke, the same pigeons walking between the stalls as though they owned them. That night she told herself it was nothing, a few grams. Nobody was harmed by a few grams. The customer would not even notice, and if by some strange chance she did notice, she would blame her own eyes before she blamed the scale of a woman she had trusted for years. The following week, the thumb found the tray again. It found it more easily this time, because the mind had already built a small room where this action was permitted. And once a room exists, the body knows the way back to it without needing directions. And because no misfortune followed, the woman's fear grew quieter each time. The way any sound grows quieter the longer we live beside it. It was not the money that changed her first, it was the words. A regular customer asked her one afternoon why the price of ginger had risen so sharply that week. And the woman heard herself say that the whole province had suffered a poor harvest, that the trucks from the highlands were arriving half empty, that she herself had paid nearly double at the wholesale market that morning. None of it was true. The harvest had been ordinary. The trucks were full. She had simply decided, in the half-second before speaking, that a larger story would make a smaller lie feel less like a lie, and more like information the customer was fortunate to receive. The customer nodded, sympathetic, and paid the higher price without complaint. This is how the second door and the fourth door often arrive together, though people rarely notice the connection. To take a little more than is owed, and to explain the taking so smoothly that the other person feels informed rather than cheated, requires the same muscle. Once that muscle is exercised, it does not tire. It grows stronger with every use. The way any muscle grows stronger, whether it is lifted for kindness or for concealment. Within a year, the woman had become skilled in ways she would not have recognized in herself before the rains. She could invent a supplier's misfortune without pausing for breath. She could describe a shipment delayed by weather that had never occurred. She could look directly into the eyes of a woman who had known her for a decade and describe a gesgerti that existed nowhere except in her own need. And because the lies were small, because they harmed no single person enough to provoke an accusation, they multiplied in the safety of being beneath anyone's notice. But something in her had begun to change that had nothing to do with money at all. She noticed it first in her sleep, which had once been easy, and had become thin and interrupted. She noticed it in the way she began rehearsing conversations before they happened, arranging her answers in advance, the way a person arranges furniture before guests arrive, not because the guests would judge the furniture, but because she could no longer trust herself to improvise honestly. She noticed it most of all in her daughter, who was 7 years old, and who had begun, without any lesson from anyone, to shade the truth about small things. A broken cup blamed on the cat, a missed chore blamed on a headache that had not existed an hour earlier. The woman scolded her daughter for this, and then stood alone in the kitchen afterward, ashamed of the scolding, because she understood exactly where the girl had learned it. Children do not learn honesty from sentences. They learn it from the shape of a household, and the shape of this household had quietly bent. It was a small event that finally stopped her, as small events so often do. An old man came to her stall one morning, a man she barely knew, thin and slow-moving, counting coins from a cloth purse with fingers that trembled slightly. He wanted only a modest bag of rice and a handful of greens, the whole purchase worth very little. As she weighed the rice, her thumb moved toward the tray from long habit, an unthinking gesture by now, as natural as breathing. But the old man was watching her hands with the particular attention of someone who has very little and has learned, through long practice, exactly what little feels like in the palm. He was not accusing her. He simply watched, the way a person watches a candle to see whether it is burning steadily or beginning to gutter. And in that ordinary moment, with nothing dramatic in the air, the woman saw herself as if from outside her own body. A woman bending a scale against an old man's few coins. A woman who had once been proud that her mother's scale did not lie, now teaching her own daughter, without a single spoken lesson, that lying is simply what a tired person does when the truth becomes inconvenient. Her thumb lifted. She weighed the rice correctly. She weighed the greens correctly. She counted his change twice, the way her mother had taught her, and placed it in his open palm with both hands, the way one gives something to an elder. The old man thanked her and shuffled away, never knowing that anything had happened at all. Nothing about her circumstances improved that day. Her husband was still unwell. The debts were still real. The rain the following season was still uncertain. But something in her had turned around and begun walking back the way it had come, and she understood, standing there with her hands still faintly trembling, that this was the real transaction that had taken place, far more significant than the coins. In the months that followed, she did not become wealthy through honesty. That is not how the story works, and it would be a lie of its own to pretend otherwise. She remained poor for some time, but she noticed that she slept differently. She noticed that when a customer asked her a question, she no longer had to search first for the answer that would serve her, only for the answer that was true, which arrived faster and required no rehearsal. She noticed that her daughter, without being told anything, began telling the truth about broken cups again, as children do when the ground beneath them becomes solid once more. This is the nature of the fourth door. It does not announce itself with the smell of blood, or the weight of a stolen object, or the heat of forbidden desire. It arrives instead in the half-second before a sentence, in the small silent choice of whether a word will carry the world as it is, or the world as we wish someone else to believe it is. A single lie may seem to weigh nothing, but a tongue, like a hand, remembers what it has been trained to do, and it will do it again, more easily each time, until the person speaking no longer notices the weight of what they carry, only the ease with which they now carry it. The wise ones say that speech is a bridge between one mind and another, and that every lie removes a plank from that bridge, without announcing which plank has been taken. The bridge may stand for a long time on the remaining planks. People may walk across it every day without falling, but the day always comes, sooner in some lives and later in others, when the bridge is asked to bear a weight it can no longer hold, and everyone standing on it discovers, all at once, how much had already been quietly removed. To refuse this door does not mean the tongue must be harsh, or that every private thought must be spoken aloud, or that kindness must be sacrificed for bluntness. There is a difference between silence and deception, and a wise person learns to live inside that difference with care. What refusal asks is smaller, and in its own way, harder, that when the tongue is about to shape a world for someone else's understanding, it shapes a true one, even when a false one would be more comfortable, more profitable, or more flattering to say. This is the fourth door we refuse to enter. And in refusing it, a person discovers something the woman at the vegetable stall came to know slowly, without ever putting it into these exact words, that a scale which does not lie, and a mouth which does not lie, protect the same thing in the end, not the coins, not the reputation, but the quiet, private confidence of a person who can stand in front of anyone, including themselves, without having anything to rehearse. So when the Buddha warned of hell, we should not imagine only a faraway punishment imposed by an angry power. The Buddha's warning is more compassionate and more precise than that. He is saying, look carefully at cause and effect. Look at what the mind becomes when it harms. Look at the heat that follows cruelty. Look at the fear that follows killing, the suspicion that follows stealing, the shame that follows betrayal, the confusion that follows lying. These are not arbitrary punishments. They are natural consequences, just as smoke follows fire and shadow follows form. Of course, Buddhism also speaks of realms beyond this human life, of destination shaped by karma after death. Hell as a karmic realm is not dismissed, but if we wait until death to understand hell, we may miss the warning signs already present in our own experience. The realms are not only places we go, they are also directions we rehearse. Every act inclines the mind, every intention trains perception, every repeated choice makes one world more familiar than another. A mind soaked in cruelty becomes suited to cruelty. A mind soaked in greed becomes suited to hunger. A mind soaked in deception becomes suited to darkness. And when the body falls away, what has been cultivated does not simply vanish. This is why the teaching is urgent. Not urgent in the sense of panic, but urgent in the sense of waking up before the house is fully burning. If a person sees smoke in the corner of the room, a wise person does not say, "Let us discuss fire later." They get up, they act. They do not wait until the flames have reached the roof. In the same way, when we notice that our conscience is becoming dull, that our speech is becoming false, that our desires are beginning to ignore the suffering of others, that greed is making us justify what we know is wrong, that is the moment to stop. Not tomorrow, not after one more indulgence, not after the damage is complete. Right there, before the mind burns itself further, the Buddha's warning is not meant to terrify us for the sake of fear. Fear alone can paralyze. Fear alone can make a person feel condemned, as though they are already lost. But the Buddha did not teach in order to trap people in despair. He taught to reveal the doorway out. If hell begins with certain actions, then freedom begins with refusing them. If the mind burns through cruelty, it cools through compassion. If it burns through greed, it cools through contentment. If it burns through betrayal, it cools through restraint and loyalty. If it burns through lies, it cools through truth. We should understand this deeply. The refusal itself is already a medicine. When there is a chance to harm and we do not harm, the heart cools. When there is a chance to take what is not ours and we leave it untouched, the heart stands upright. When desire invites us into secrecy and we step back, something noble is protected. When a lie would save face but we choose honesty, the mind becomes clean in that very moment. No one may applaud. No one may know, but the heart knows, and this time the inner witness does not accuse. It blesses. There is a great difference between a person who is restrained only because they lack opportunity, and a person who sees the opportunity clearly, feels the temptation fully, and still refuses. That refusal has power. It is not weakness. It is not cowardice. It is the strength to remain whole when a part of us wants to be divided. It is the courage to disappoint craving rather than betray conscience. And every such refusal changes the temperature of the mind. It removes one log from the fire. It opens one window in a dark room. It gives the heart a little more air. Many people carry private suffering because of things they have done and never spoken of. They may wonder whether peace is still possible. The answer begins with honesty. Not necessarily public confession in every case. Not reckless exposure that creates more harm, but inward honesty, the willingness to stop defending the wrong. As long as we keep justifying harm, the wound remains infected. When we say quietly and clearly, "That was wrong," the healing can begin. Remorse, when understood wisely, is not hell itself. It is the mind's capacity to recognize fire and turn away from it. But remorse must be joined with change. To sit forever in guilt is another form of burning. The purpose of seeing wrongdoing is not to hate oneself. It is to stop feeding the causes of suffering. A person who has killed must learn to protect life. A person who has stolen must learn to give and to live honestly. A person who has betrayed must learn restraint, repair, and reverence for trust. A person who has lied must practice truth in small, steady ways until speech becomes clean again. This is how the road turns, not through one dramatic declaration, but through repeated acts that teach the heart a new home. There are people who are punished by society and still do not understand. And there are people who are never punished by society, yet one moment of moral clarity changes their life. They see what they are becoming, and they are frightened in a wholesome way, not frightened of a deity waiting to strike them, but frightened of losing their own humanity, frightened of becoming someone whose presence brings suffering, frightened of growing old with a heart full of secrets and ashes. That kind of fear, if it leads to wisdom, it says, stop now, do not go farther. This path does not end in peace. Hell begins in the heart, when the heart becomes a place where compassion cannot breathe, where truth cannot stand, where trust cannot live. It begins when we repeatedly choose the burning thing and call it pleasure, choose the crooked thing and call it intelligence, choose the hidden thing and call it love, choose the false thing and call it survival. But the same heart that can become hell can also be rescued. As long as there is awareness, there is a door. As long as there is conscience, even painful conscience, there is still something alive. And perhaps this is the tenderness hidden inside the severity of the teaching. The Buddha names these actions clearly, because he does not want us to suffer blindly. He does not soften the truth, because a softened warning may not save someone walking toward a cliff. But neither does he condemn us without a path. He points to the fire and he points to the water. He shows the danger and he shows the refuge. Do not kill. Do not steal. Do not violate trust through sexual misconduct. Do not lie. These are not merely commandments carved into morality. They are shelters for the mind. When we live outside these shelters, storms enter. When we return to them, even imperfectly, we begin to feel the difference. The breath becomes less burdened. The eyes become less evasive. The night becomes less threatening. The world may still be difficult, but we are no longer adding the fire of remorse to the pain of living. We may still have problems, losses, aging, illness, uncertainty, but beneath them there can be a ground of self-respect. There can be the quiet knowledge, I am trying not to harm. I am trying not to take what is not mine. I am trying not to betray. I am trying not to deceive. And that quiet knowledge matters more than people often understand. It is not pride. It is not the arrogance of thinking oneself pure. It is simply the freshness of a conscience not constantly dragged through mud. A person with such a conscience may be poor and still sleep well. They may be unknown and still walk lightly. They may have few possessions and still feel inwardly rich, because the heart that does not have to hide from itself is already tasting a freedom that no outer success can provide. If hell can begin in the heart, then heaven too may begin before death, in the freshness of a conscience unburdened. And this is why refusal should never be mistaken for emptiness. This quiet knowledge shows itself most clearly not in argument but in a single ordinary life, the kind that never makes the news and is never spoken of beyond the small circle it touches. There was once a young man who ran a small repair shop with a friend he had known since childhood. They had built the business together with almost nothing, borrowing tools, sharing one motorbike between them, sleeping some nights on cots in the back room, so they would not have to pay for lodging twice. For years, whatever came into the shop was split evenly, without argument, because the friendship felt sturdier than any contract. Then a large contract arrived, larger than anything the two of them had handled before, repairing equipment for a company on the other side of the city. The young man handled the negotiation alone, because his friend was recovering from a fever that week and could not travel. In the course of that negotiation, the client offered a bonus for early completion, paid quietly, outside the official invoice, as a gesture of appreciation. He did not mention it when he returned. He told himself, in the moment, that it was a small oversight, not a decision. He had been tired. There had been many details to remember. He would mention it later, when there was a natural place in the conversation for it. But the natural place never quite arrived, and the longer it did not arrive, the stranger it would have felt to bring it up on its own, unprompted, as though confessing to something, rather than simply forgetting. Weeks passed. The bonus sat in a separate account he had opened, for reasons he did not examine too closely. His friend, still weak from the fever, thanked him more than once for carrying the negotiation alone, for handling everything so capably while he himself could do nothing but rest. Each time his friend said this, something in the young man's chest tightened, quick and sharp, like a small stone dropped into water. But the water always closed back over it, and the surface looked calm again within moments. This is how the second door and the fourth door most often travel together in an ordinary life, not through dramatic theft, but through the slow accumulation of one silence after another, each silence small enough to seem harmless, each one making the next silence easier to keep. At first, the young man believed the discomfort would fade. He told himself that everyone deserved something private, some small reserve set aside for hardship, and that he had simply been the one clever enough to notice the opportunity. But the discomfort did not fade. It changed shape instead, the way a smell changes shape when it settles into cloth, and cannot be washed out with a single rinse. He began avoiding certain conversations. When his friend spoke of dividing next month's earnings, the young man found himself calculating quickly, quietly, adjusting numbers in his head, so the concealed amount would never surface in a comparison. He became, without intending it, a careful accountant of his own dishonesty, tracking not what was owed, but what must never be discovered. He noticed that he had begun sleeping poorly, not from any particular nightmare, but from a kind of low static that never fully switched off, even in the quiet hours. He noticed that he flinched slightly whenever his friend opened the shop's ledger, even though the ledger contained nothing that could expose him. He noticed that praise, which had once felt warm, now felt like a small weight added to an already crowded shelf. Each time his friend called him honest, capable, trustworthy, the words did not comfort him, they accused him. This is a peculiar suffering that has little to do with the size of the wrong committed and everything to do with what the wrong requires of the person carrying it. A single concealment demands almost nothing, but a concealment that must be maintained day after day in the presence of someone who trusts you completely demands a great deal. It demands vigilance. It demands the quiet management of one's own face. It demands a private ledger running parallel to the visible one, and the effort of keeping two ledgers in agreement, one true and one false, is exhausting in a way that has no obvious cause and therefore no obvious cure. Nearly a year passed this way. The business grew, the friendship, from the outside, appeared unchanged. The two men still ate together most evenings, still argued cheerfully about football, still covered for each other when one of them needed a day away. But the young man had begun to notice a strange thinness in his own enjoyment of these ordinary pleasures, as though he were watching them through glass rather than standing inside them. The turning point, when it came, was not dramatic. His friend's mother became seriously unwell, and the medical costs were more than the friend could gather on his own. He came to the young man late one evening, embarrassed, asking whether the shop could advance him a portion of next month's earnings early, just enough to cover the first round of treatment. The young man opened the separate account that night, alone, and looked at the number that had grown there over the past year, a number that would have covered the entire cost of his friend's mother's treatment, without requiring an advance of anything, without requiring his friend to feel embarrassed at all, without requiring any of the strange, silent arithmetic that had governed the past 12 months of his life. He sat with that number for a long time. What moved him in the end was not fear of discovery, though discovery would certainly have been painful. It was something quieter and, in its own way, more decisive, the sudden clarity of seeing exactly what his silence had cost, not in money, but in the shape of his own days. He understood, sitting there, that he had spent a year guarding a secret that had given him almost nothing in return except the privilege of feeling slightly less than himself. Every time his closest friend looked at him with trust. The next morning, he told his friend everything, not gradually, not with careful phrasing designed to soften the account, but plainly, the whole arrangement from the beginning, the bonus, the account, the year of silence. He did not know, walking into the shop that day, whether the friendship would survive the telling. His friend was quiet for a long time after hearing it. There was anger in that silence, and hurt, and the young man did not try to hurry him past either. But eventually his friend asked only one question. Why now? And the young man answered honestly that he was not entirely certain, except that carrying the secret had become heavier than facing its consequences, and that his friend's mother deserved help that did not depend on his own dishonesty, finding a convenient moment to end. The friendship did not return to exactly what it had been before. Trust, once broken, rarely returns in its original shape. For a while there was a new carefulness between them, a slight formality that had not existed in their earlier years. But it did return, slowly, built again on smaller honest moments, the way a wall is rebuilt stone by stone rather than poured all at once. And the young man discovered something that surprised him. The relief of confession, even a painful one, was lighter by far than the year of silence had been. Shame faced directly has an end. Shame concealed does not. It simply changes its clothing and continues. This is what the old teachings mean when they say that hell can begin before death, in the ordinary architecture of a life. It is not a distant courtroom waiting at the end of one's days. It is the quiet tax a person pays every single day for maintaining a gap between what is true and what is shown. And it is also what they mean when they say that the confession of wrongdoing, offered honestly and followed by real change, is not itself a punishment but a kind of medicine, bitter to swallow and genuinely healing, unlike the silence it replaces, which only postpones the same illness to a later and usually less forgiving day. The first door is the door of life. To guard it, we begin by asking, whose life, whose safety, whose peace am I affecting right now? Not only when we hold a weapon, not only when an animal is placed before us, not only in situations that obviously carry blood. The door of harming life appears whenever cruelty is allowed to become casual. It appears in the way we treat the weak, the voiceless, the frightened, the dependent. It appears when anger makes another person's dignity seem unimportant. It appears when we speak as though someone's suffering is entertainment. It appears when our impatience becomes a knife in the heart of another living being. To refuse killing is not merely to keep the hands clean from blood. It is to train the heart away from delighting in destruction. It is to notice when violence first enters us as a mood, then as a word, then as permission. If we wait until the final act, we may already be too far from ourselves. So the wise person guards the beginning. When the mind starts to enjoy revenge, we pause. When we find ourselves wishing that someone would be ruined, we pause. When we are drawn toward places where cruelty is celebrated, we step back. This is not weakness. This is self-rescue. A fire is easier to stop when it is still a spark. There are people who say I would never kill, but they feed daily on anger, resentment, mockery, and contempt. They may not notice that the soil is being prepared. A mind that rehearses harm becomes less shocked by harm. A heart that repeatedly dehumanizes others becomes less able to see life as sacred. Guarding the first door means keeping reverence alive. It means remembering that every being trembles before pain, every being clings to life, every being fears loss. Even when we must be firm, we do not need to be cruel. Even when we must protect ourselves, we do not need to poison the heart. The refusal to harm is not only for the sake of others, it protects the one who refuses. It keeps the inner world from becoming a battlefield. The second door is the door of what is not given. To guard it, we ask, is this truly mine? This question seems simple, but it can cut through 1,000 clever excuses. Is this money truly mine? Is this credit truly mine? Is this position truly earned? Is this information mine to use? Is this time, this trust, this advantage, something I have a right to take? Theft does not always arrive with darkness and a broken lock. Sometimes it wears clean clothes. Sometimes it sounds like business. Sometimes it hides behind entitlement. Sometimes it tells us, everyone does it. If you do not take it, someone else will. But the heart knows when it is reaching for what has not been offered. It may whisper softly, but it knows. And if we ignore that whisper enough times, we begin to lose the ability to hear it. That is the danger. The object we take may be small, but the damage to conscience is not small. A person can steal a little and lose a great deal. He may gain an item, a sum, a convenience, but lose simplicity in the mind. After that, the world no longer feels open. There is always something to hide, something to defend, something to explain away. The stolen thing sits in the house, but the mind becomes restless around it. To guard this door is to respect boundaries even when no one is checking, especially when no one is checking. A person who only behaves honestly under supervision is not yet free. He is merely controlled by fear. But the one who can stand before an easy gain and say, "No, this is not mine," has discovered a different kind of wealth. There is a quiet dignity in walking away from what the hand could have taken. There is a clean joy in eating only what is rightfully earned, in sleeping without needing to remember which lie protects which theft, in meeting others without the hidden stain of exploitation. Prevention here is also wisdom. If we know that certain places, certain arrangements, certain companions or certain opportunities make dishonesty easy, we should not pretend we are stronger than we are. Pride says, "I can handle it." Wisdom says, "Why stand so close to the cliff?" If money is entrusted to us, we keep the records clear. If power is given to us, we make the process transparent. If temptation grows in secrecy, we bring light into the room. The point is not to live suspiciously, as though danger is everywhere, but to live humbly, knowing that the mind can justify almost anything when desire becomes loud enough. The third door is the door of desire that violates trust. To guard it, we ask, who will suffer if I follow this desire? That question must be asked before the fire becomes beautiful. Once desire has dressed itself in romance, once secrecy becomes thrilling, once the mind begins composing poems for its own betrayal, it is much harder to see clearly. So we ask early, who will be wounded? Who will be humiliated? Who will lose faith in love, in marriage, in friendship, in spiritual promises, in their own worth? What child may carry this crack in silence? What home may become cold? What honest person may be forced to live inside the consequences of my hunger? Tainted desire is powerful because it rarely introduces itself as destruction. It comes as comfort. It says you deserve to be understood. It says, this is special. It says no one will be hurt if no one knows. It says life is short. And yes, life is short. That is precisely why we should not spend it burning down the trust that holds people together. The sweetness of a secret affair may seem intense, but intensity is not purity. Urgency is not destiny. Some fires are bright because they are consuming the house. To refuse such desire is not to hate the body, nor to despise affection, nor to live without tenderness. It is to honor tenderness enough not to steal it from where it does not belong. It is to understand that desire without conscience becomes appetite, and appetite without restraint becomes suffering. There are relationships that are not food for us. They are offerings on someone else's altar. They belong to vows, to families, to boundaries, to trust. If we reach for them, we may taste pleasure. But we also become the kind of person who can eat what was never meant for us. Here, prevention is not cowardice. It is courage in its most practical form. Do not keep feeding private conversations that you already know are changing the heart. Do not dress temptation as friendship when the body knows otherwise. Do not remain alone in emotional secrecy and call it innocence. Do not test yourself in rooms where you hope to fail. If a door is dangerous, do not stand there admiring the handle. Walk away while walking away is still possible. Sometimes victory does not look like standing firm in the middle of temptation. Sometimes victory looks like leaving before the story begins. There is a strange pride in the human mind. We want to believe we can approach the edge, lean over, admire the depth, and still never fall. But many who fell once said the same thing. Guarding the third door requires humility. It requires the honesty to admit, I am not beyond temptation. I am not made of stone. I must protect the goodness I still have. This honesty is not shameful, it is mature. A person who knows his weakness can build a fence around his peace. A person who denies his weakness may one day wake up among ruins asking how everything collapsed so quickly. The fourth door is the door of speech. To guard it, we ask, is what I am about to say true? And is it beneficial? Not merely, can I prove it? Not merely, will it make me look good? Not merely, will it get me out of trouble? Truth is not a tool to be picked up only when useful. Speech shapes worlds. With words we can heal, guide, comfort, clarify, and protect. With words we can also mislead, divide, seduce, humiliate, and destroy. A lie may leave the mouth in 1 second and live in another person's mind for years. False speech is dangerous because it becomes familiar. At first, the heart trembles. The first lie may taste bitter, but if repeated, the bitterness fades. The tongue learns the path. The face learns the expression. The mind learns to arrange reality into whatever shape is convenient. Then a person no longer lies only to others. He begins to lie to himself. And when self-deception becomes normal, the inner compass breaks. He may still walk, speak, work, smile, even teach others, but inwardly he is lost. To refuse lying does not mean we must speak harshly, or reveal everything, or use truth as a weapon. The question is not only whether a statement is factual, but whether the speech is wholesome. There are truths spoken from cruelty, and there are silences kept from compassion. Guarding speech requires both honesty and kindness. Before speaking, we can pause and ask, will this reduce confusion or increase it? Will this protect trust or exploit it? Am I speaking to help or to control? Am I guiding someone toward clarity or bending their perception for my benefit? This is especially important when others trust us. A parent's words can become a child's inner voice. A teacher's words can shape a student's understanding of life. A leader's words can move crowds toward peace or violence. A friend's words can either bring someone back to themselves or push them deeper into delusion. To distort another person's perception is a grave matter. It is a theft of their clear seeing. It is a kind of injury done without touching the body. That is why refusing false speech can become a path to heaven. Each time we tell the truth when a lie would benefit us, we strengthen the soul. Each time we remain honest when deception is easy, we reopen the way to trust. But again, prevention is mercy. If we know certain conversations always pull us into gossip, manipulation, exaggeration, or deceit, we should not keep entering them unprepared. If we know we lie when we are afraid, we must learn to pause before answering. If we know we exaggerate to impress, we must practice being ordinary. If we know we twist stories to win sympathy, we must practice telling events simply. Speech can be trained. The mouth can become clean again. The mind can learn to prefer plain truth over decorated falsehood, but it begins with vigilance at the door. These 4 doors, when seen together, become a daily spiritual discipline. They are not distant religious rules placed upon us from outside. They are mirrors held before the movements of the heart. Do not harm life. Do not take what is not given. Do not violate trust through desire. Do not distort truth. Morning, afternoon, evening, the practice returns. In the marketplace, in the home, in the office, in the car, in the glowing privacy of a phone screen, the same 4 doors stand before us. We do not need to wait for a monastery, a retreat, a holy mountain, or the final season of life. The path is already under our feet, and this guarding is not a grim life. It is not a life without laughter, warmth, affection, beauty, or success. In truth, it creates more room for all of these. A person who does not harm has fewer enemies in the heart. A person who does not steal has fewer shadows in the house. A person who does not betray trust has fewer fires to hide. A person who does not lie has fewer stories to maintain. There is a kind of happiness that comes not from getting everything we want, but from no longer being hunted by what we have done. When the 4 doors are guarded, compassion has space to grow. Trust can breathe. Peace does not have to fight so hard to remain. We become easier to live with, easier to love, easier to believe, and perhaps most importantly, we become able to sit quietly with ourselves. That is no small blessing. Many people can impress the world but cannot endure their own silence. The guarded life may appear modest from the outside, but inwardly it becomes spacious. There is less smoke, less panic, less repair, less fear of being found out. Of course, no one guards perfectly from the beginning. We stumble, we forget, we discover old habits still alive within us. But the teaching is not given to make us despair. It is given so we can return. Every day offers another chance to stand at the door before action begins. Every day we can become a little less careless, a little more awake. We can learn the taste of danger earlier. We can learn to step back sooner. We can learn to say no without hatred, without drama, without needing applause. Just a quiet no, spoken from the part of us that still wants to be free. And when we say that no, something in us is saved. Not only the life we might have harmed, not only the property we might have taken, not only the trust we might have broken, not only the truth we might have bent, we save the clear place within ourselves. We save the future from one more burden. We save the mind from another chain. At the end of the path, the teaching becomes beautifully simple. The life we save may be our own. And so we return, at last, to the quiet image with which this teaching began. A person stands before 4 doors. No one else may be watching. There may be no witness, no judge, no crowd, no temple bell, no sound of thunder in the sky. There is only the person, the door, and the small movement of the heart. Behind one door is the chance to harm a living being and get what one wants. Behind another is the chance to take what was never given. Behind another is the sweetness of forbidden pleasure, wrapped in secrecy and excitement. Behind another is the convenient lie, the sentence that can save face, win advantage, escape blame, or bend another person's trust. At the beginning, these doors may have looked ordinary. They may even have looked inviting. That is the nature of temptation. It rarely appears as fire in the beginning. It appears as opportunity. It appears as urgency. It appears as a small exception. It whispers just this once. It says no one will know. It says you deserve this. It says the world is already full of wrongdoing. So why should you be the one to hold back? But after walking through the teaching, after looking carefully at the weight of these actions, the doors no longer look the same. We begin to see what is hidden behind them. We see that the door of killing does not only open toward the end of another creature's life. It also opens toward the hardening of our own heart. We see that the door of stealing does not only take an object from someone else, it takes away the dignity of contentment within ourselves. We see that the door of sexual misconduct does not only satisfy desire for a moment, it can shatter trust, wound families, and turn sweetness into ashes. We see that the door of lying does not only change words, It distorts the very ground on which human beings stand together. And once we see clearly, refusal is no longer merely denial. It becomes protection. To refuse killing is to protect compassion. It is to say that life is not ours to handle carelessly. It is to recognize that every being trembles before pain, clings to breath, fears harm, and seeks safety in its own way. Even when a creature is small, even when it cannot speak, even when its life seems far from ours. The act of sparing it teaches the heart softness. A person who repeatedly refuses cruelty is quietly training the mind to see others not as obstacles, not as objects, not as inconveniences, but as participants in the same fragile existence. There may be times when anger rises. There may be times when irritation burns. There may be times when we feel powerful enough to crush, dismiss, destroy, or punish. But in that very moment, if we stop, if we step back, if we let the living being remain alive, something sacred is preserved, not only out there but in here. The hand that does not strike becomes lighter. The mind that does not destroy becomes more spacious. The heart that does not delight in harm remains capable of mercy. To refuse stealing is to protect contentment. It is to say, what has not been given is not mine. This sounds simple, yet it touches a deep hunger in human life. Much of the world is built on taking more, comparing more, wanting more, fearing that what we have is not enough. The mind looks outward and says, if I could just have that, I would be complete. If I could quietly take this, no one would suffer much. If I could bend the rule here, hide the truth there, slip this into my pocket, move this advantage toward myself, then I would be secure. But stealing never truly gives security. It plants unease. It creates a hidden debt in the mind. Even if no one accuses us, we know. Even if the world praises us, somewhere inside there is a room we avoid entering. Contentment cannot grow in a heart that keeps feeding on what belongs to others. Peace cannot settle in a mind that must keep hiding its own hands. So the noble refusal says no, not with bitterness. Not because the object has no value. Perhaps it has great value. Perhaps it would be useful. Perhaps taking it would solve an immediate problem. Still, the heart says no, it was not given. And in that refusal, the person becomes rich in a way that cannot be measured. Rich in self-respect, rich in trustworthiness, rich in the clean sleep that comes from having nothing to conceal. To refuse sexual misconduct is to protect trust. This is especially difficult because desire can dress itself in beauty. It can appear as romance, intensity, destiny, loneliness, or the feeling of being finally understood. It can come with music in the mind. It can make danger seem alive and responsibility seem dull. It can persuade a person to call betrayal love, to call secrecy intimacy, to call selfishness passion. But the wise learn to look beyond the first sweetness. They ask, who will be wounded if I enter here? What trust will be broken? What promises will be emptied of meaning? What innocence will be lost? What kind of person will I become if I train myself to take pleasure at the cost of another heart's safety? There are victories in life that no one sees. One of them is turning away from a forbidden affection before it becomes a fire, to walk away when the blood is warm, when the imagination is intoxicated, when the opportunity is open, requires a courage that may be greater than the courage of battle. On a battlefield, people may see you stand your ground, but in the battlefield of desire, the greatest victory may look like retreat. You leave the room. You end the conversation. You stop feeding the fantasy. You refuse the secret path. To the world, nothing happened, but in truth, something immense happened. A future suffering was prevented. A family may have been spared. A conscience remained whole. A heart chose honor over appetite, and to refuse lying is to protect truth. Truth is more than correctness. It is the breath of trust between people. When truth is present, others can rest in our words. They do not have to constantly defend themselves against manipulation. They do not have to wonder which part of our speech is bait, which part is mask, which part is performance. To be truthful is to give others a ground firm enough to stand on. Lying may seem small, a little lie to avoid embarrassment, a gentle lie to gain approval, a clever lie to escape consequence, a profitable lie to guide someone's belief in our favor. But every lie teaches the mind that reality can be edited for convenience. And if repeated often enough, lying becomes not merely something we do, but something we become. The tongue grows used to bending, the face grows used to pretending, the mind grows used to living in rooms of its own invention. This is why the refusal matters. When the chance to lie appears, and we choose truth, we may lose something on the surface. We may lose praise. We may lose advantage. We may lose the easy escape. We may have to admit weakness, apologize, return what was taken, confess what happened, or accept a consequence we hoped to avoid. But what we keep is far greater. We keep the clarity of the heart. We keep the strength of being one person inside and outside. We keep the path open between our words and reality. These 4 refusals, plain when spoken, do not kill, do not steal, do not misuse sexuality, do not lie. But a human life is shaped by plain things repeated sincerely. A bowl is filled, drop by drop. A road is made step by step. A destiny is formed choice by choice. We often imagine spiritual life as something dramatic, something surrounded by symbols, robes, ceremonies, great extraordinary visions, or public acts of virtue. But much of the noble life is invisible. It happens in the pause before the hand moves. It happens in the breath before the mouth speaks. It happens in the moment when nobody would blame us, because nobody would know, and still we know. A person does not need to be famous to live nobly. A person does not need to be praised as holy. A person does not need to explain their restraint to the world. Sometimes the most powerful moral acts leave no trace except in the heart. The insect not crushed, the money not taken, the affair not entered, the lie not spoken. These things may never be recorded. No one may build a monument to them. No one may tell the story. Yet they can shape the direction of a life more deeply than the moments that receive applause, because each refusal saves more than it appears to save. When we refuse to kill, we save life, but we also save tenderness. When we refuse to steal, we save property, but we also save contentment. When we refuse sexual misconduct, we save relationships, but we also save trust. When we refuse to lie, we save facts, but we also save truthfulness itself. And behind all of these, we save the heart from becoming a place where harm feels normal. This is the quiet miracle of restraint. It does not always feel glorious. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like swallowing pride. Sometimes it feels like turning away from something the whole body wants. Sometimes it feels like being foolish in a world that rewards cleverness. But restraint is not weakness. Restraint is the strength to remain free from the command of impulse. It is the ability to say, I do not have to obey every hunger that passes through me. I do not have to become every anger. I do not have to follow every desire. I do not have to speak every word that would benefit me if it harms the truth. This is where the path becomes intimate. The teaching is not only about heaven and hell as distant realms after death. It is also about the direction of the heart right now. Every action has a taste. Every choice leaves an imprint. When we choose harm, the mind becomes darker, heavier, more afraid, more divided. When we choose compassion, honesty, restraint and respect, the mind becomes lighter. Even if life remains difficult, something within us stands upright. We may still suffer, but we do not have to suffer from self-betrayal. We may still face loss, but we do not have to lose our own integrity. And perhaps this is why the Buddha's warning is so compassionate. He does not merely condemn. He reveals the seriousness of what we are doing with our lives. He shows that hell is not entered only through monstrous acts committed by monstrous people. It can begin in ordinary moments of carelessness, when we tell ourselves that one small cruelty does not matter, one small theft does not matter, one secret betrayal does not matter, One convenient lie does not matter, but he also shows the opposite. Heaven does not begin only with grand offerings or heroic sacrifices. It can begin in ordinary moments of refusal, when the heart chooses not to darken itself. So now, as we stand again before the four doors, we are not the same as before. We know more. We have seen further. The doors still exist. Temptation does not disappear simply because we understand it. Anger may still visit. Greed may still whisper. Fear may still urge us to lie. But understanding gives us a lamp. We can hold it up before the door. We can ask, where does this lead? What will this make of me? What will it cost another being? What will it cost my own heart? And if we have the courage, we can turn away. Not loudly, not proudly, not with hatred toward the world, just with a steady step. We leave the door unopened. We let the life remain. We let the possession remain with its owner. We let the trust remain unbroken. We let the truth remain unbent. And with each refusal, the road before us becomes clearer. This is the life we save by refusing. We save the lives around us from our unguarded impulses. We save our relationships from our hidden hungers. We save our speech from corruption. We save our mind from regret. We save our future from the weight of actions we cannot undo. And most of all, we save the tender possibility of becoming someone we ourselves can trust. In the end, heaven may not be as far away as we imagine. It may begin before any other world, before any final judgment, before any distant reward. It may begin in the exact moment we have the courage to refuse what would darken the heart. It begins when restraint is stronger than impulse, when truth is dearer than convenience, when compassion is more important than victory, and when we would rather walk away clean than remain and win something that stains the soul. If you find this useful, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment. And now let the teaching settle quietly. 4 doors behind us, unopened. 1 clearer road ahead.